The woman standing in the rain outside Lucas Reed's garage wore a dress that cost more than his truck, and desperation that money couldn't buy. Blood trickled from a cut above her eyebrow, mixing with mascara-streaked tears. And when she spoke, her voice cracked on words that sounded like they'd been rehearsed 100 times but never meant to be said out loud. "I have nowhere else to go." Lucas froze, wrench still in hand, the fluorescent lights of his small-town garage buzzing overhead like static electricity before a storm. This is a story about what happens when two worlds collide at the worst possible moment, and what we discover about ourselves when we have nothing left to lose. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you stick around until the end, hit that like button. You're going to want to see where this goes. The bolt Lucas was working on finally gave way at 9:47 p.m., 3 minutes before he would have given up and gone home to his daughter. He'd been lying under Mrs. Henderson's ancient Buick for the better part of 2 hours, fighting with a rusted exhaust manifold that had probably been original to the Carter administration. His back ached, his knuckles were bleeding in 3 places, and the coffee he'd microwaved at 6 was now a cold, oily sludge in a chipped mug sitting on his workbench. This was his life. Had been for 8 years, since Emma was born and her mother decided that motherhood wasn't the adventure she'd signed up for. Rachel had left on a Tuesday. Lucas remembered because it was trash day, and she'd somehow managed to time her departure so that he was rolling the bins to the curb when her car disappeared around the corner, trunk loaded with everything she could fit. He'd stood there on the sidewalk in his boxers and an old Marines t-shirt, holding the recycling bin, watching her taillights fade. A neighbor had waved. Lucas had waved back. That was the kind of man he was. He rolled out from under the Buick, wiped his hands on a rag that was somehow dirtier than his hands, and glanced at the clock. Emma would be asleep by now. His sister Maggie would have handled dinner, homework, bath time, the whole evening routine Lucas tried to make it home for but usually missed on Thursdays. Maggie never complained. She had 3 kids of her own and still managed to treat Emma like a fourth, but Lucas felt the weight of it anyway. The debt. The inadequacy. He was reaching for the light switch when he heard the car. Not the familiar rumble of pickup trucks or the wheezy coughs of the sedans that usually limped into his garage. This was different, smooth, expensive, the kind of purr that came from German engineering and regular maintenance at dealerships where they served you espresso while you waited. Lucas hesitated, hand on the switch. The engine cut off. A car door opened, then slammed with the kind of force that spoke of emotion, not carelessness. Footsteps. He walked to the bay door, which he'd already pulled halfway down, and peered out into the parking lot. The car was a black Mercedes S-Class, sleek as a knife, and probably worth more than his entire garage. It sat at an angle across 2 parking spaces, driver's door still open, interior lights glowing in the darkness. And walking toward him through the rain that had just started to fall was a woman who looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine and directly into a nightmare. She was maybe 5'7", slender, wearing a dress that was simultaneously elegant and completely impractical, charcoal silk that clung to her in the rain, sleeveless despite the October chill. Her dark hair was pulled back in what had probably been a neat bun hours ago, but was now falling in damp strands around her face. She wore heels that clicked against the wet pavement with each step, but it was her face that stopped Lucas cold. There was blood. Not a lot, but enough. A cut above her left eyebrow, maybe an inch long, still weeping red. Her makeup was smeared, expensive makeup, the kind Rachel used to buy and never wear, mascara tracking down her cheeks in dark rivulets that had nothing to do with the rain. She stopped about 10 feet from the garage door, hugging herself against the cold, and looked at him with eyes that were simultaneously fierce and utterly broken. "Are you open?" she asked. Her voice was hoarse, controlled, but barely. Lucas glanced back at his garage, at the fluorescent lights, the scattered tools, the Buick still up on the lift. Then back at her. "Not really," he said. "I was just closing up." She nodded, like she'd expected that answer, like she'd expected every door to close tonight. "Right," she said. "Of course." She turned to go, swaying slightly on those ridiculous heels, and Lucas felt something twist in his chest. The same thing that had made him join the Marines at 18. The same thing that had made him take custody of Emma without a second thought. The same deeply inconvenient instinct that had shaped every major decision of his life. "Wait," he heard himself say. She stopped, back still to him. You're hurt, Lucas said, stating the obvious because he didn't know what else to say. She touched her eyebrow gingerly, then looked at her fingertips. They came away red. She stared at them for a moment like she was surprised to find she could still bleed. It's nothing, she said. Doesn't look like nothing. She turned back to face him, and in the harsh fluorescent spill from his garage, Lucas got a better look at her. Mid-30s, maybe. Beautiful in that sharp, deliberate way that came from good genes and better money. But there were shadows under her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide, and her hands were shaking. I just need... She stopped, swallowed, started again. Is there a hotel nearby? Lucas almost laughed. The nearest hotel was the Red Oak Motor Lodge, 20 miles south on Route 9, and calling it a hotel was generous. It was the kind of place that rented rooms by the hour and didn't ask questions. Not the kind you'd want, he said. Something flickered across her face. Not quite despair, but close. I see, she said quietly. The rain was picking up, fat drops that drummed against the roof of her Mercedes and turned the parking lot into a field of tiny splashes. She was getting soaked, that expensive dress turning dark with water, but she didn't seem to notice or care. Lucas made a decision he knew he'd probably regret. Look, I've got a first aid kit inside, he said, stepping back and pulling the bay door up a few feet. At least let me look at that cut before you go anywhere. She studied him for a long moment, and Lucas had the distinct impression he was being evaluated with the kind of precision usually reserved for business deals or tactical operations. Why? She asked finally. Why what? Why help me? You don't know me. Lucas shrugged. You're bleeding in my parking lot. Seems like reason enough. She laughed, a short, bitter sound that held no humor whatsoever. You'd be surprised how many people would disagree with that logic. Well, I'm not people, Lucas said. I'm just a guy with a first aid kit and about 10 minutes before I need to get home. Your choice. She looked back at her car, then at the rain, then at him. Whatever calculus she was running, it came out in his favor, or maybe she was just out of options. All right, she said, and walked into his garage. Up close, she was even more out of place. Lucas pulled over a stool, the one he usually sat on when he was working on lower jobs, and gestured for her to sit. She did, with a grace that seemed automatic, like she'd been trained to maintain composure even while falling apart. I'm Lucas, he said, washing his hands in the industrial sink in the corner. The water ran brown for a few seconds before clearing. Adriana, she replied. Adriana Voss. The name meant nothing to him, but the way she said it suggested it should, like it was supposed to open doors or change conversations. Lucas dried his hands and grabbed the first aid kit from the cabinet above his workbench. It was military grade, the real thing, not the civilian knockoff from CVS. He'd kept it from his time in the Corps, and it had served him well over the years. Kids fell off bikes. Maggie's husband Dave once sliced his hand open on a roofing project. Life in a small town meant being prepared. He pulled out an antiseptic wipe and approached Adriana carefully, like she was a skittish animal. This is going to sting, he warned. Everything stings tonight, she said. One more won't matter. He cleaned the cut as gently as he could. She didn't flinch, didn't make a sound, just stared straight ahead at a calendar on the wall advertising brake pads. October's picture was a vintage Mustang, cherry red, pristine. How'd this happen? Lucas asked, applying a butterfly bandage. I walked into a door, she said flatly. Right. I did. Literally. I was leaving a building very quickly and didn't see the glass. It was dark. Lucas stepped back to examine his work. The bandage would hold. The cut wasn't deep enough for stitches, but it would scar if she wasn't careful. You want to tell me what you're running from? He asked. Her eyes snapped to his, sharp and assessing. What makes you think I'm running? Because people who aren't running don't show up at closed garages at 10 p.m. wearing evening wear and bleeding. For a moment he thought she'd shut down. Tell him to mind his business, get up and leave. Instead, she surprised him. Everything, Adriana said quietly. I'm running from everything. She told him the story in pieces, sitting on that stool in his garage while the rain hammered the roof and the fluorescent lights hummed their electric song. Her name was Adriana Voss, and until approximately 6 hours ago, she'd been the CEO of Voss Industries, a manufacturing company her grandfather had founded 60 years ago. She'd inherited it at 28 when her father died of a heart attack on the factory floor. Spent the last 7 years building it from a regional player into a national force. 80 million in revenue, 300 employees, contracts with major retailers. I was good at it, she said, and there was no arrogance in her voice, just fact. Better than my father, if I'm honest. He was old school. Believed in handshakes and loyalty. I believed in contracts and data. What happened? Lucas asked. He'd finished bandaging her cut and was now leaning against his workbench, arms crossed, listening. He should have been home an hour ago. Maggie would be wondering. But something about this woman, this story, held him in place. My business partner happened, Adriana said. Marcus Holloway. I brought him on 5 years ago. He was brilliant. Harvard MBA. Connections everywhere. The kind of strategic mind that could see 3 moves ahead. We made a good team. I focused on operations. He handled expansion and acquisitions. Let me guess, Lucas said. He screwed you. Eloquently put, but yes. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Turns out those contracts I believed in so strongly had loopholes, clauses I never thought to look for because I trusted him. He's been systematically transferring assets, securing shadow votes from board members, building a case for my removal. Can he do that? He did do that. This afternoon. Emergency board meeting. I wasn't informed about until an hour before. They voted. 8-3. I'm out. Lucas whistled low. That's rough. Rough, she repeated like she was testing the word. Yes, I suppose it is rough to lose everything you've built in a single afternoon. What about lawyers? Can you fight it? Lawyers cost money. Money is tied up in assets I no longer control. My personal accounts are frozen. Marcus claimed fraud, filed an emergency injunction. It'll get sorted out eventually, but eventually doesn't help me tonight. She looked down at her hands, still shaking slightly. I went to my apartment, penthouse downtown, beautiful view, 1,800 square feet of carefully curated emptiness. The locks were changed. My cards declined at the hotel. I called everyone I thought was a friend, and turns out I don't actually have friends. I have business associates. Associates who've already heard the news and decided backing me is too risky. Family? Lucas asked. Dead, estranged, or dependent on me for money, which amounts to the same thing now. She laughed again, that same bitter sound. I have a cousin who called me 3 hours ago to ask if the rumors were true. When I said yes, she hung up. Jesus, Lucas muttered. No, Adriana said sharply. Not even him. I stopped believing in divine intervention around the same time I realized no one was coming to save me. We save ourselves, or we don't get saved. The anger in her voice was raw, real, and Lucas recognized it. He'd felt it before, standing in his driveway, watching Rachel's car disappear. Sitting in the hospital with newborn Emma while nurses asked who to put down as the emergency contact. That specific flavor of betrayal that comes when you realize you're alone in ways you never imagined possible. So why here? He asked. Why this town? I was driving, Adriana said simply. No destination, just driving, saw your lights. Thought maybe... She stopped, shook her head. I don't know what I thought. The silence that followed was heavy, but not uncomfortable. Outside, the rain continued its assault, turning the world into a watercolor of grays and blacks. Lucas glanced at the clock. 10:23 p.m. You can't drive in this, he said, making another decision he'd probably regret. And you can't sleep in your car. I don't have many options. Actually, you do. He pushed off from the workbench and walked toward the back of the garage, where a narrow staircase led up to what had once been an office and was now mostly storage. I've got a loft up there. It's not finished. I was converting it into a break room or something, never got around to completing it, but there's a couch, a space heater, a bathroom with running water. Adriana stood up, following him with her eyes. You're offering to let me stay here? Just for tonight. Tomorrow you can figure out next steps. You're very trusting for someone who just met me. Lucas shrugged. You're very desperate for someone who probably had security staff this morning. I figure we're even. She studied him again with that same assessing look, and Lucas wondered what she saw. A 32-year-old mechanic with grease under his fingernails and a life that fit into one small town. A guy who still wore his military-issue watch because it was practical. Someone so far removed from her world, they might as well be different species. "Why are you doing this?" Adriana asked. "Because someone should," Lucas said. "And apparently, tonight, I'm someone." The loft was exactly as advertised, unfinished and barely functional. The walls were dry-walled but unpainted. The floor was plywood subflooring, no finish. But there was a beat-up leather couch Lucas had salvaged from a curb 3 years ago, a space heater that worked most of the time, and a bathroom that was small but clean. "It's not the Ritz," Lucas said, flipping on the light. "The Ritz wouldn't have me right now," Adriana replied. "This is perfect." She was lying, of course. Nothing about this was perfect. But Lucas appreciated the effort. He showed her how the space heater worked, found a blanket in a storage box, Emma's baby blanket, actually, soft yellow fleece with ducks on it, and left a bottle of water from the mini fridge he kept downstairs. "There's a diner about 2 miles down Route 9, he said. "Opens at 6. If you're still here in the morning, I'll drive you." "Thank you," Adriana said, and for the first time since she'd walked into his garage, her voice cracked with something that might have been genuine emotion. "You didn't have to do this." "No," Lucas agreed, "but I did anyway. That's kind of my thing." He was halfway down the stairs when she called out. "Lucas?" He turned. "What made you say yes to letting me stay?" He thought about it for a moment, about Rachel and Emma and all the nights he'd felt like he was drowning in responsibility with no one to throw him a rope, about being the kind of person who could walk away from someone bleeding in a parking lot versus the kind who couldn't. "I've got a daughter," he said finally. "She's 8, and every night I hope that if she ever shows up somewhere desperate and alone, there's someone like me who doesn't turn her away." Adriana nodded slowly, understanding passing between them like a current. "Good answer," she said. Shit. Lucas drove home through the rain, his old F-150 rattling and protesting, but getting the job done like it always did. The roads were empty, the town already asleep, and he had too much time to think about what he'd just done. Letting a stranger stay in his garage probably violated at least a dozen common-sense rules. Maggie would kill him if she found out. Dave would give him one of those long, suffering looks that said, "Here goes Lucas, saving people again." Emma would probably think it was cool and want to meet the lady in the fancy car. He pulled into his driveway at 10:52 p.m., killed the engine, and sat in the truck for a minute, listening to the rain drum against the roof. The house was dark except for the porch light Maggie always left on for him. It was a small house, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, built in the 70s and showing every year of it. The yard needed mowing, the gutters needed cleaning, the deck out back had boards that were starting to rot. It was home. He trudged inside, kicked off his boots in the mudroom, and found Maggie asleep on his couch, some reality show playing on mute on the TV. She'd probably been waiting up to make sure he got home okay, like she always did. Lucas grabbed a blanket from the closet and draped it over her, then climbed the stairs to check on Emma. His daughter was asleep in her room, which looked like a toy store had exploded. Stuffed animals everywhere, books scattered across the floor, a half-finished Lego castle on her desk. She slept like a starfish, sprawled across the twin bed with 1 foot hanging off the edge, mouth open, snoring softly. Lucas stood in the doorway and watched her breathe. This was what mattered. This was the whole world, right here. Everything else, the garage, the bills, the constant scramble to keep his head above water, was just background noise to the main event of making sure Emma grew up okay. He pressed a kiss to her forehead, whispered, "Love you, kiddo," and retreated to his own room. Sleep didn't come easy. He kept thinking about Adriana Voss, alone in his garage, wrapped in a baby blanket, probably staring at the ceiling and wondering how her life had imploded so completely in such a short time. He knew that feeling. The vertigo of losing your footing, the terror of free fall. Around 2 a.m., Lucas finally drifted off, and his last conscious thought was that he hoped she'd still be there in the morning. He had a feeling this was just beginning. Dawn came gray and wet, the rain having settled into a steady drizzle that turned the world soft and blurred. Lucas woke at 5:30 a.m. like he always did, muscle memory from the Marines, and went through his morning routine on autopilot. Shower, coffee. Check on Emma, who was still dead asleep and would be until Maggie came by at 7 to get her ready for school. He left a note on the kitchen counter. Thanks for last night. Love you. And drove back to the garage through the pre-dawn darkness. The Mercedes was still there, parked exactly where Adriana had left it, rain beating on its perfect black surface. Lucas unlocked the bay door, flipped on the lights, and stood at the bottom of the stairs to the loft. You decent? He called up. A pause. Then, define decent. He climbed the stairs and found Adriana sitting on the couch, still wearing yesterday's dress, the baby blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She'd finger-combed her hair and wiped away the smeared makeup, and in the gray morning light she looked younger, vulnerable. You're still here, Lucas said. Nowhere else to be, she replied. Is that offer of breakfast still open? It. The Route 9 diner was exactly what it sounded like. A long, narrow building with a counter, 12 stools, and 6 booths with cracked vinyl seats. It smelled like coffee and bacon grease and had been serving the same menu since 1987. Lucas and Adriana slid into a corner booth, and within seconds a waitress appeared. Her name tag said Dottie, and she looked like she'd been born holding a coffee pot. Morning, Lucas, she said, already filling his mug. Usual? Yeah, thanks, Dot. She turned to Adriana, and Lucas watched the calculation happen in real time. Expensive dress, wrong context, sitting with Lucas Reed of all people. And for you, hun? Just coffee, Adriana said. Black. You sure? Pancakes are good today. Coffee is fine. Dottie shrugged and disappeared, leaving them in relative privacy. The diner was mostly empty. A couple of truckers at the counter, an old man reading a newspaper in the far booth. You come here often? Adriana asked, and there was a hint of amusement in her voice. Most mornings. Food's cheap, coffee's strong, and Dottie doesn't ask questions. Important qualities. In a small town, yes. The coffee arrived, and Adriana wrapped both hands around the mug like it was the first warmth she'd felt in days. Maybe it was. So, Lucas said, cutting into the pancakes Dottie had brought him despite not asking. What's the plan? The plan, Adriana repeated. She sipped her coffee, winced. It was diner coffee, which meant it could strip paint, and set the mug down. I need to get my accounts unfrozen, access my legal documents, figure out exactly what Marcus did and where the vulnerabilities are. Can you do that from here? I can do that from anywhere with an internet connection. She pulled out her phone, an iPhone with a cracked screen, Lucas noticed, and stared at it like it was a bomb. Assuming my email still works, you think they'd shut that down? They shut down everything else. Why not? But she unlocked the phone anyway, pulled up her email, and after a moment of loading, her face shifted. Huh. Still active. That's good, right? It means they either forgot or they want to monitor what I'm doing. She scrolled through messages, her expression darkening with each swipe. 73 emails since yesterday afternoon. Reporters, lawyers, board members covering their asses. Oh, here's a fun one. Marcus himself, offering to discuss the transition at my earliest convenience. Are you going to respond? Eventually, but not from a position of weakness. She locked her phone and set it face down on the table. I need leverage. I need to understand the full scope of what he did, and I need time. How much time? I don't know. A few days? A week? She met his eyes. I know I can't stay in your garage forever. Lucas ate a forkful of pancakes, thinking. The smart move was to drive her to the nearest bus station, wish her luck, and return to his normal life. The safe move. But when had he ever made the safe move? The loft is yours for as long as you need it, he said. On one condition. Adriana's eyebrows rose. Which is? You tell me the truth, all of it. Because if I'm going to have you staying on my property, I need to know what I'm getting into. She studied him over the rim of her coffee mug, and Lucas had the impression he was being evaluated again, weighed and measured. Fair enough, she said finally. What do you want to know? Everything. They sat in that booth for 2 hours while Adriana Voss told him the story of her life. She'd grown up in Pittsburgh, the only child of Thomas Voss, a man who believed manufacturing was the backbone of America and taught his daughter to read blueprints before she could read chapter books. Her mother died when she was 6, cancer, fast and brutal. And after that, it was just her and her father and the factory. I grew up on that floor, Adriana said, stirring her third cup of coffee. I learned to weld before I learned to drive. Dad believed in understanding the work from the ground up. Said you couldn't lead people doing something you'd never done yourself. Sounds like a good man, Lucas said. He was. Stubborn, old-fashioned, but good. Her voice softened. When he died, everyone assumed I'd sell. I was 28, single, no business experience except what I'd absorbed growing up. The board wanted to bring in a professional CEO, someone with credentials. But you said no. I said hell no. That factory was my father's legacy. I wasn't going to let a bunch of MBA suits turn it into another quarterly earnings report. She smiled, but it was edged with something dark. So I proved them wrong. I doubled revenue in 3 years, modernized production, landed contracts no one thought we could get. And then you brought in Marcus. And then I brought in Marcus. She sighed, leaning back against the cracked vinyl. I thought I needed someone like him, someone who understood the game at a higher level. Mergers, acquisitions, financial engineering, all the things I'd never learned because I was too busy actually building things. When did you realize something was wrong? 6 months ago. Little things at first, board meetings I wasn't CC'd on, financial reports with redacted sections Marcus said were pending audit. I started digging, quietly, but he was always 3 steps ahead. She clenched her jaw. Yesterday, I found out why. He'd been preparing for this since the day I hired him. Every contract I signed, every partnership I approved, he'd positioned himself to take control the moment I was vulnerable. And the board just went along with it? The board saw dollar signs. Marcus promised them double returns within a year, expansion into markets I was too conservative to pursue. They voted their wallets, not their consciences. Lucas pushed his empty plate aside, processing. So what do you need to fight back? Evidence? Paper trails. Proof that what he did violates our partnership agreement or constitutes fraud. Something concrete enough that even a frozen bank account can't stop me from filing suit. You think you can find it? I know I can. Marcus is smart, but he's arrogant. Arrogant people make mistakes. Her eyes hardened, and Lucas saw something in them that hadn't been there last night. Not desperation. Determination. I built that company from the ground up. I'm not letting him steal it. Oops. They left the diner just before noon, and Lucas drove Adriana back to the garage. The rain had stopped, leaving everything glistening and clean, and the world felt scrubbed new. I need to set up a workspace, Adriana said as they climbed the stairs to the loft. Somewhere I can spread out documents, make calls. Do you have Wi-Fi? Lucas almost laughed. This is a garage in a town of 3,000 people. I barely have cell service. Right, of course. She looked around the loft, already mentally rearranging it. I'll need to get a hotspot and a laptop. Mine's locked in my apartment. And access to financial records, legal documents. She trailed off, overwhelmed. One step at a time, Lucas said. What's the first thing you need? A computer and files from the company's server, if I can still access them remotely. There's a library in town. Public computers, free internet. It's not fancy, but it'll work. Adriana nodded, already moving. Let's go. Oh. The Cedar Falls Public Library was a small brick building on Main Street, sandwiched between a hardware store and a bakery. Lucas had taken Emma there every Saturday since she was old enough to hold a book, and the librarian, Mrs. Chen, greeted him with her usual warm smile. Lucas, what brings you by on a Thursday? Research project, he said, gesturing to Adriana. My friend here needs to use a computer for a few hours. Mrs. Chen's smile didn't waver, but her eyes took in Adriana's expensive dress, the bandage above her eyebrow, the whole incongruous picture. Of course. Sign in at the desk and you can use any terminal. Adriana signed in. Lucas noticed she used a fake name, Sarah Mitchell, and claimed a computer in the far corner, away from the handful of other patrons. I'll be back in a few hours, Lucas said. I've got a garage to run. Thank you, Adriana said, and the gratitude in her voice was real. For everything. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen my bill. He meant it as a joke, but she didn't smile. I'm serious, Lucas. You didn't have to help me. Most people wouldn't have. Yeah, well, he shrugged, uncomfortable with earnestness. I'm not most people. Lucas spent the rest of the day doing what he always did, fixing cars, ordering parts, returning calls from customers who wanted to know when their vehicles would be ready. Normal life, ordinary rhythms. But his mind kept drifting back to the woman in his loft, to the story she'd told, to the quiet fury in her voice when she talked about losing everything. At 4 p.m., he picked Emma up from school. She came bounding out wearing her backpack and a smile that could light up cities. Daddy! Hey, kiddo, how was school? Boring. We had a math test, and I think I aced it. Can we get ice cream? It's October. Ice cream doesn't have a season, Dad. Lucas laughed and ruffled her hair. Fine, but just a small cone. They stopped at Mabel's ice cream parlor, and Emma got a double scoop of chocolate chip because small was a relative concept. They sat on the bench outside, Emma chattering about her day, her friend Sophie's new puppy, the substitute teacher who couldn't pronounce anyone's name right, the book report due next week. Dad, Emma said, chocolate smeared on her chin. Yeah? Are you okay? You seem weird. Weird how? I don't know, like you're thinking about something else. Kids, too perceptive for their own good. Just work stuff, Lucas said. Nothing for you to worry about. Is the garage okay? Are we okay? The question hit him harder than it should have. Emma had heard him and Maggie talking about money once. Just once, late at night when they thought she was asleep, and now she carried that worry like a stone in her pocket. We're fine, Lucas said firmly. Better than fine. I promise. She nodded, reassured by his certainty, even though he felt none himself. When he dropped Emma back at Maggie's, she had a sleepover planned with a friend. His sister cornered him at the door. You were late last night, Maggie said. It wasn't quite an accusation, but close. Had a situation at the garage. What kind of situation? The kind where I'm too tired to explain. Thanks for watching Emma. Maggie folded her arms, a gesture that meant she wasn't letting this go. Lucas, talk to me. He sighed. Someone needed help. I helped. That's all. That's never all with you. Maggie, no, listen. I love that you're a good person. I do. But you have Emma to think about. You can't just... I know what I'm doing, Lucas said, more sharply than he intended. They stared at each other for a moment, years of history and unspoken agreements hanging between them. Okay, Maggie said finally, but if you need backup, you call me. Deal? Deal. He returned to the garage just after 6. Adriana was there, sitting at the workbench he'd cleared for her, surrounded by papers and a borrowed laptop from the library. She'd changed into jeans and a sweater she must have bought somewhere. The dress was nowhere in sight. You look different, Lucas said. Less conspicuous? She replied without looking up. I can't walk around town in designer clothes without attracting attention. Find anything useful? Maybe. She spun the laptop around to show him a spreadsheet dense with numbers. I managed to access some of the company's financial records before they locked me out completely. There are irregularities, transfers that don't match the official ledgers, shell companies I've never heard of. Lucas squinted at the screen. I don't know what I'm looking at. You're looking at fraud or something close to it. Marcus has been siphoning money into side accounts for at least 2 years. Small amounts, nothing that would trigger audits, but it adds up. She pulled the laptop back, fingers flying across the keyboard. If I can trace these transactions, prove they violate our partnership agreement, I have grounds to sue. Not just for reinstatement, for criminal charges. That's good, right? It's a start. But I need more. Documentation, emails, anything that shows intent. She rubbed her eyes, exhaustion catching up with her. This is going to take time. You've got time, Lucas said. As much as you need. She looked at him then, really looked, and Lucas felt exposed in a way he hadn't since the Marines, when drill instructors could see straight through to your soul. Why are you doing this? Adriana asked quietly. And don't give me the line about your daughter. There's more to it. Lucas leaned against the workbench, considering his answer. 8 years ago, I came home from Afghanistan with a bad knee and no idea what to do with my life. Got a job at a garage in Pittsburgh, saved every penny, and bought this place when the owner retired. It's not much, but it's mine. I built it from nothing. I understand that, Adriana said. I know you do. That's why I'm helping, because I know what it's like to build something with your own hands and watch other people try to take credit or tear it down. And I know what it's like to feel alone. He met her eyes. Nobody should have to fight their battles alone. Not if there's someone around who can help. Adriana was quiet for a long moment. Thank you, she said finally, for seeing me. Yeah, well, you're hard to miss. She smiled, a real smile, the first he'd seen from her. And just like that, something shifted between them. An alliance formed, an understanding reached. They were in this together now, for better or worse. Lucas just hoped it wouldn't destroy both their lives in the process. The next 3 days fell into a rhythm that felt both strange and inevitable. Lucas would wake before dawn, check on Emma, drop her at school, then return to the garage where Adriana was already awake, hunched over the borrowed laptop, eyes red from staring at spreadsheets and legal documents. She worked with an intensity that was almost frightening. Lucas had seen that kind of focus before, in the Marines, in soldiers who knew their lives depended on getting something exactly right. But this wasn't about survival in the traditional sense. This was about reclaiming something that had been stolen, and Adriana approached it like a military campaign. You need to eat, Lucas said on the third morning, setting a paper bag on the workbench beside her. She didn't look up. I'm not hungry. Didn't ask if you were hungry, said you need to eat. Adriana sighed but reached for the bag. Inside was a breakfast sandwich from the diner. Eggs, bacon, cheese, on a toasted English muffin. The smell alone was enough to make her stomach growl. Thank you, she said, taking a bite. Then, after a moment, you don't have to keep doing this. Doing what? Taking care of me. I'm not your responsibility. Lucas was under Mrs. Henderson's Buick again, finally finishing the exhaust work he'd started 4 days ago. Never said you were, but you're in my garage, which makes you my problem, and I take care of my problems. Is that what I am? A problem? You're something, he said, and she could hear the smile in his voice, even though she couldn't see his face. Haven't figured out what yet. The truth was, Lucas didn't mind. Having Adriana around was like watching a chess grandmaster at work. Every move calculated, every decision analyzed from 6 different angles. She'd turned his dusty loft into a war room, papers organized into stacks that made sense only to her, timelines drawn on sheets of butcher paper she'd bought at the hardware store. I found something, she said suddenly, fingers freezing over the keyboard. Lucas rolled out from under the Buick. Good something or bad something? I'm not sure yet. She turned the laptop toward him, pointing at a series of email exchanges. These are from 2 years ago. Marcus discussing a potential acquisition with someone named David Chen. The acquisition never happened, at least not officially, but money changed hands, a lot of money. How much? $3.2 million, transferred to a holding company called Vertex Solutions LLC. And that's suspicious because? Because Vertex Solutions doesn't exist. Or it didn't until Marcus created it specifically for this transaction. It's a shell company. And according to these emails, the money was supposed to be returned within 90 days, but it never was. She scrolled through more documents, her jaw tightening. He's been using company funds as his personal piggy bank. Lucas whistled low. That's fraud. That's provable fraud. If I can get these emails authenticated, if I can trace the money trail. She stopped herself, visibly reining in her excitement. It's not enough yet, but it's close. What do you need? Access to the company's main server. The email account I'm using is archived. I can see old messages, but nothing current. If Marcus is still operating the same way, there'll be more evidence in the active system. Can you hack in? Adriana gave him a look that was half amused, half exasperated. I'm a CEO, not a cybercriminal. I wouldn't even know where to start. So what's the alternative? She was quiet for a moment, thinking. Then, I have a friend. Former employee, actually. IT director named Sam Patel. We go way back. He was one of the first people my father hired when I was still in high school. If anyone would help me, it's him. You trust him? I did. Before all this. She closed the laptop, uncertainty flickering across her face. But everyone I thought I could trust has already proven me wrong. Maybe Sam is just another name on that list. Only one way to find out, Lucas said. Adriana pulled out her phone, stared at it like it might bite her, then dialed. Lucas watched her face transform as the call connected, watched her straighten her spine, smooth her expression into something professional and controlled. The vulnerable woman who'd shown up bleeding in his parking lot disappeared, replaced by the CEO who'd built an empire. Sam? It's Adriana Voss. A pause. Yes, I know you've heard. I'm sure everyone's heard. Another pause, longer this time. Then her shoulders relaxed fractionally. I need a favor, a big one. She walked away, conversation dropping to a murmur Lucas couldn't make out, and he returned to his work. The Buick's exhaust manifold finally cooperated, and he moved on to an oil change for Pastor Mike's ancient Camry, then a brake job for the high school principal's minivan. Normal work, the kind that paid bills and kept the lights on. Around noon, Adriana came back downstairs. Her expression was carefully neutral, which Lucas had learned meant she was either very happy or very upset. Well, he asked. Sam's in. He's going to give me remote access to the server tonight after everyone's gone home. 30 minutes. That's all he can risk without triggering security alerts. That's good news. It's terrifying news. If we get caught, Sam loses his job. If we don't find anything, I've wasted my only shot. She ran a hand through her hair, a gesture of frustration Lucas was beginning to recognize. But it's the only move I've got. What time? Midnight. The night security is minimal then, mostly automated systems. Lucas glanced at the clock. 12 hours. You should rest. Get your head clear before tonight. I can't rest. I need to prepare, figure out exactly what I'm looking for, map out the directory structures. Adriana. He waited until she met his eyes. You're running on fumes. You've barely slept in 3 days. If you burn out before midnight, this whole thing falls apart. She opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. He was right, and she knew it. Fine, she said. 2 hours. But then I'm back at it. Deal. She climbed the stairs to the loft, and Lucas heard the creak of the old couch as she lay down. Within minutes, the sounds of movement stopped, replaced by the deep, even breathing of someone who'd finally stopped fighting sleep. Lucas finished the brake job, cleaned his tools, and was locking up the garage bay when his phone rang. Maggie's name flashed on the screen. Hey, sis. Lucas, we have a problem. His stomach dropped. What kind of problem? Is Emma okay? Emma's fine, but she's asking questions about the woman. What woman? Don't play dumb. Sophie's mom saw you at the diner with some lady in an expensive dress. Sophie told Emma. Emma asked me who she was, and I didn't know what to say because you haven't told me anything. Lucas closed his eyes, pinching the bridge of his nose. Small towns. Everything was currency. Every sighting a transaction in the economy of gossip. It's complicated, he said. I'm sure it is. That's why you're going to come over tonight and explain it to me. And to Emma, because she thinks you have a girlfriend and won't stop talking about it. Maggie, but 6 o'clock, dinner. Don't be late. She hung up before he could argue. Lucas looked up at the loft where Adriana was sleeping, then at his watch. 4 hours until dinner. 4 hours to figure out how to explain something he barely understood himself. He spent those hours working through the backlog of repairs that had piled up over the past few days, losing himself in the familiar rhythm of diagnostics and fixes. Cars made sense. You could identify a problem, trace it to its source, and repair it. People were messier. Their problems didn't come with error codes or repair manuals. At 5:30, he climbed the stairs to wake Adriana. She was curled on the couch, still wearing the jeans and sweater, one hand tucked under her cheek like a child. The late afternoon light coming through the window turned her hair gold at the edges, and for a moment Lucas saw her not as the CEO fighting to reclaim her empire, but as someone who'd been hurt and was trying very hard not to show it. Adriana, he said softly. Her eyes opened immediately, alert despite having just woken. Another thing he recognized from the military, The ability to snap from sleep to full consciousness in seconds. What time is it? 5:30. I have to go to my sister's for dinner. You'll be okay here? She sat up, rubbing her eyes. Of course. Thank you for letting me sleep. You needed it. He hesitated. My sister knows you're here. Well, she knows there's a woman staying at my garage. She's asking questions. What did you tell her? Nothing yet. That's the problem. He leaned against the doorframe. Emma's asking questions too. About you. Adriana's expression shifted, something guarded sliding into place. Your daughter. Yeah, she's 8 and thinks I have a girlfriend because someone saw us at the diner. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to complicate your life. You didn't complicate it. I did when I let you stay. He pushed off from the doorframe. Look, I don't know what to tell them. The truth seems too complicated, but I'm not good at lying. Tell them I'm a friend who needed help. It's not exactly a lie. Is that what we are? Friends? The question hung between them, more significant than Lucas had intended. Adriana considered it, her expression unreadable. I don't know what we are, she said finally, but friend is close enough. Lucas nodded, accepting the ambiguity because he didn't have a better answer either. I'll be back by 9, he said. We've got 3 hours before midnight. That enough time to prep? It'll have to be. He left her there and drove to Maggie's house, rehearsing explanations that all sounded insufficient. The truth was, he didn't fully understand why he'd let Adriana stay, why he kept helping her, why her problems had become his problems. It was more than just doing the right thing. It was something else, something he couldn't quite name. Maggie's house was chaos incarnate. 3 kids under 10, a golden retriever who thought everyone who walked through the door was there specifically to play with him, and the constant background noise of a home filled with life. Emma tackled Lucas the moment he walked in, wrapping her arms around his waist. Dad, Aunt Maggie said you're bringing a friend to dinner. Lucas shot his sister a look. Maggie shrugged, unapologetic. I didn't say that, he corrected. I have a friend. Different thing. Is she your girlfriend? Emma asked, eyes wide with the kind of romantic hope only an 8-year-old could muster. No, kiddo, just a friend who needed help. What kind of help? The adult kind. Boring stuff. Emma wrinkled her nose. All adult stuff is boring. Dinner was spaghetti and meatballs, eaten at a table that barely contained the controlled chaos of Maggie's family. Dave, Maggie's husband, kept the kids entertained with terrible jokes while Lucas and Maggie cleaned up afterward. So, Maggie said, scrubbing a pot with more force than necessary. Are you going to tell me what's really going on? Lucas dried a plate, buying time. What do you want to know? Everything. Who she is, why she's staying at your garage, how long this is going to last. Her name is Adriana. She's going through a rough patch and needed somewhere to stay. I don't know how long. That's not everything. That's all I can tell you right now. Maggie stopped scrubbing and turned to face him. Lucas, I love you. You know I do, but you have a daughter to think about. You can't just take in random strangers. She's not random, and I'm being careful. Careful how? Do you even know her last name, where she's from, what kind of trouble she's running from? Yes to all 3, and it's not trouble, it's complicated. Complicated how? Lucas set down the dish towel, meeting his sister's eyes. Maggie, I need you to trust me on this. I know what I'm doing. Do you? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're making the same mistakes you always make, putting everyone else first and yourself last. That's not what this is. Then what is it? He didn't have an answer for that. Or maybe he did, but it wasn't one he was ready to say out loud. Maggie sighed, her anger deflating into concern. Just promise me you're being smart about this, for Emma's sake, if not your own. I promise. She hugged him then, fierce and quick, and Lucas held on a second longer than necessary, drawing strength from the only family he had left besides his daughter. He left Maggie's house at 8:45, Emma secured for another sleepover with her cousins, and drove back through the dark to the garage. The town was quiet, most businesses closed, the streets empty except for a few cars heading home from late shifts. The garage was lit when he arrived, warm yellow light spilling from the windows of the loft. Lucas climbed the stairs and found Adriana exactly where he'd left her, surrounded by papers and glowing in the light of the laptop screen. How'd it go? She asked, without looking up. About as well as expected. My sister thinks I'm crazy, and my daughter thinks you're my girlfriend." That got her attention. She glanced up, something almost like amusement in her eyes. "And what did you tell her?" "The truth. That you're a friend who needed help." "And she believed you?" "She's 8. She believes everything I tell her, for now, anyway." He grabbed a folding chair from the corner and sat down. "What about you? You ready for tonight?" Adriana gestured at the papers spread across the workbench. "I've mapped out the directory structure, identified the most likely locations for incriminating files, and created a prioritized search list. If Sam gives me the access he promised, I can get in, grab what I need, and get out in under 20 minutes. And if you can't find anything, then I'm back to square one. But I don't think that'll happen. Marcus is too arrogant to cover all his tracks. He thinks he's won, which means he's getting sloppy." Lucas checked his watch. 3 hours until midnight. "You want coffee?" "I want this to be over, but coffee's a good second choice." He made a pot using the ancient coffee maker in the garage's break room, the kind that produced something closer to motor oil than actual coffee, but it was caffeinated, and that was what mattered. They sat in the loft, nursing their mugs, watching the clock tick toward midnight with the kind of anticipation soldiers felt before a mission. "Can I ask you something?" Adriana said, breaking the silence. "Sure." "Why'd you join the Marines?" Lucas took a sip of coffee, remembering. "I was 18 and angry. My dad had just died. Heart attack, same as your father, actually. I didn't know what to do with all that rage, so I pointed it at something useful. Did it help? The Marines? In some ways. Gave me purpose, structure. Taught me I was tougher than I thought." He smiled slightly. "Also taught me I hate taking orders, which is why I didn't re-up after my first tour. But you stayed disciplined. I've noticed the way you work. Everything organized, methodical. Old habits. Plus, when you're a single parent, discipline is survival. Emma needs routine, needs to know what to expect. I can't give her a lot, but I can give her that." Adriana was quiet for a moment, then, "Her mother really just left?" "Yep. Decided motherhood wasn't for her and walked away. Haven't heard from her since." "That must have been hard." "It was, but it also clarified things. Before Emma, I was drifting. After Emma, I had direction. She's the best thing that ever happened to me, even if the circumstances were lousy." "You're a good father," Adriana said softly. "I'm trying to be. That's all any of us can do, right? Try to be better than we were yesterday." She met his eyes, and something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. Two people trying to be better despite everything working against them. At 11:30, Adriana's phone buzzed. A text from Sam. "Ready when you are." "It's time," she said, and Lucas heard the tremor in her voice she was trying to hide. She opened the laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she connected to the company's VPN using the credentials Sam had provided. The screen filled with login prompts, security warnings, directory trees. "I'm in," she whispered. Lucas moved behind her, watching over her shoulder as she navigated through folders with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where she was going. Financial records, email archives, personnel files. She was a bloodhound on a scent, zeroing in with precision. "There," she said, opening a folder labeled simply M.H. Marcus Holloway. "This is his personal directory, everything he thought was private." She started downloading files, hundreds of them, the progress bar crawling across the screen with agonizing slowness. Lucas watched the clock. 5 minutes, 10, 15. Come on, Adriana muttered. At 18 minutes, her phone buzzed again. "Sam, security sweep starting early. Get out now." "Damn it!" Adriana's fingers flew, canceling some downloads, prioritizing others. The progress bar jumped to 87%, 92, 98, complete. She disconnected just as the VPN access terminated from the other end, the screen going dark. For a moment, neither of them breathed. Then Adriana opened the downloaded files, scanning through them with eyes that were both exhausted and exhilarated. "I've got it," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Lucas, I've got it all." "What did you find?" She turned the laptop toward him, pointing at an email chain between Marcus and someone named Victoria Chen, David Chen's sister, as it turned out. They've been planning this for 3 years, not 2 years, 3, before he even approached me about the partnership. Her voice was shaking now, adrenaline and rage mixing into something volatile. He came to me with a plan already in place to take over the company. Every move, every suggestion, every contract, it was all designed to position him for this moment. Lucas read through the emails, his jaw tightening with each one. The level of premeditation was staggering. Marcus had played the long game, insinuating himself into Adriana's trust while systematically building the framework to destroy her. "This is enough," he said. "This is more than enough to prove fraud." "It's enough to destroy him," Adriana corrected, and there was steel in her voice. Every illegal transaction, every forged signature, every board member he bribed, it's all here. He didn't just steal my company, he committed crimes. Felonies. She started organizing the files, creating folders, building what Lucas recognized as a legal brief even though he'd never seen one before. She worked with a fury that was almost frightening, her exhaustion forgotten, replaced by the kind of clarity that comes when you finally see the path forward. "What's your next move?" Lucas asked. "I need a lawyer, a good one, someone who specializes in corporate fraud and has the resources to take this to court." "You know anyone like that?" "I know several. The question is whether they'll take my case when I can't pay them yet." "What about contingency?" Adriana looked at him surprised. "You know about contingency agreements?" "I watch TV, lawyer takes the case, gets paid when you win. It's more complicated than that, but yes, essentially." She chewed her lip, thinking. "There's a firm in Pittsburgh, Morrison and Associates. They handled a case against one of my competitors a few years ago. Aggressive, smart, and willing to work on contingency if the case is solid enough." "Sounds like you have a plan." "I have the beginning of a plan, but I need to move fast. The longer I wait, the more time Marcus has to cover his tracks or disappear assets." She looked at Lucas, and for the first time since she'd shown up in his parking lot, she looked genuinely hopeful. "Can I use your garage as a mailing address? I need somewhere to receive documents that isn't my old apartment." "Use whatever you need." "Thank you." She closed the laptop, leaning back against the wall. "I know I keep saying that, but I mean it. You've given me more than just a place to stay. You've given me a chance to fight back. You would have found a way without me. Maybe, but it would have taken longer, and I would have done it alone." She met his eyes. "That's the part I'm grateful for. Not being alone." The moment stretched between them, fragile and significant, and Lucas felt the shift again, the sense that something was forming here that neither of them had planned for or could fully control. His phone buzzed, shattering the moment. A text from Maggie. "Emma wants to know if she can meet your friend tomorrow." Lucas showed the message to Adriana. "What do you think?" "I think your daughter deserves to know who's staying in her father's garage. She's going to ask you a million questions." "I can handle questions." Lucas typed back, "Maybe. Let me check." Then to Adriana, "You sure about this? Once Emma knows you're real, she's going to want to adopt you. Fair warning." Adriana smiled, the real smile again, the one that made her look younger and less guarded. "I've faced hostile board members and corporate sharks. I think I can handle an 8-year-old. Famous last words." They sat in comfortable silence after that. The laptop closed. The evidence secured. The first battle won, even if the war was far from over. Outside, Cedar Falls slept, unaware that in a garage on the edge of town, two people were planning something that would shake the foundation of a company and maybe change both their lives. Lucas thought about Maggie's words, that he always put everyone else first. But this didn't feel like sacrifice. It felt like purpose, like the kind of fight worth having, not because he had to, but because he wanted to. Because Adriana deserved someone in her corner and he happened to be available. "You should sleep," he said finally. "Tomorrow's going to be a long day. Tomorrow and every day after until this is done." But she stood, stretching, wincing as her back protested the hours hunched over the laptop. "Lucas?" "Yeah? If this works, if I get the company back, I want to do something for you, pay you back somehow." "You don't owe me anything." "I owe you everything. Let me figure out how to repay that." Lucas shook his head. "You want to repay me? When? Take back what's yours and show Marcus Holloway that he picked the wrong person to underestimate. That's payment enough." She studied him for a long moment, and Lucas wondered what she saw. A small-town mechanic with grease under his fingernails and a life that fit into 3 rooms. Someone so far removed from her world they should never have crossed paths. But they had crossed paths, and now neither of them was alone. "Deal," Adriana said finally. "I'll win, for both of us." Morning came with the kind of gray sky that promised rain but couldn't quite commit. Lucas woke to find a text from Adriana sent at 4:47 a.m. "Can't sleep. Working on the brief. Coffee?" He smiled despite himself, then winced as his back reminded him he'd fallen asleep in the chair downstairs rather than driving home. He'd meant to leave after their conversation, but exhaustion had won out, and now his neck felt like someone had tied it in knots. By the time he made it upstairs, Adriana had already brewed a fresh pot and was deep into whatever legal document she was constructing. She looked up when he entered, and he noticed the dark circles under her eyes had deepened. "You didn't sleep at all, did you?" Lucas asked. 2 hours, maybe. She gestured at the laptop screen, which was filled with dense paragraphs and footnoted citations. "I got Morrison and Associates on the phone at 6. They want to see everything I have by noon. That's good, right? It's incredible. James Morrison himself is reviewing the case. He doesn't usually take new clients personally anymore, but when I sent him a summary of what we found, he called me back in 10 minutes. Her fingers drummed against the desk, nervous energy she couldn't contain. "This could actually work, Lucas. This could really work." "Of course it'll work. You've got him dead to rights." Having evidence and winning in court are two different things. Marcus has resources, he'll fight back hard. So will you. She looked at him then, really looked, and Lucas saw something shift in her expression. Gratitude mixed with something else he couldn't quite name. "I need to drive to Pittsburgh today," she said. "Meet with Morrison in person, sign the retention agreement, start building the actual case. It's a 3-hour drive each way." "You want company?" The question surprised them both. Lucas hadn't planned to offer, but the words were out before he could stop them. Adriana hesitated. "You have the garage. And Emma. Garage can close for a day, and Emma's at Maggie's until tomorrow anyway, so you want company or not?" She smiled, and it transformed her face completely. "Yeah, I'd like that." They left at 8, after Lucas had made a few calls to reschedule appointments and left a note on the garage door. Closed for the day. Emergency. Back tomorrow. His customers would understand, or they wouldn't. Either way, this felt more important. The drive to Pittsburgh took them through rolling hills that were just starting to show fall colors, reds and golds mixed with the stubborn green of trees that hadn't quite accepted summer was over. Adriana drove her Mercedes, which felt absurdly luxurious compared to Lucas's truck. The leather seats were heated, the sound system could probably wake the dead, and the whole thing handled curves like it was on rails. "This is a nice car," Lucas said, understating it considerably. "It's a company car. Or it was. Technically, I'm not sure who owns it now." She glanced at him. "Think they'll repossess it?" "After what you found last night, I think they'll be too busy with lawyers to worry about a car." They drove in comfortable silence for a while, NPR playing softly in the background, the landscape rolling past. Lucas found himself relaxing in ways he hadn't in years. No garage to worry about, no immediate crisis with Emma, just the road and the woman beside him, and the sense that something significant was happening, even if he couldn't quite define what. "Tell me about Emma," Adriana said suddenly. "What do you want to know?" "Everything. What's she like?" Lucas smiled the way he always did when thinking about his daughter. "She's smart, too smart sometimes. Reads at a 6th grade level even though she's only in 3rd. Loves animals, wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up. She's also stubborn as hell, which she gets from me." "What about from her mother?" "Nothing good," Lucas said flatly. "Rachel gave her life. And that's where her contribution ended." "I'm sorry, that must be hard to explain." "It was at first, but Emma's adapted. Kids are resilient like that. She's got me, she's got Maggie and Dave and her cousins. She's got a whole support system. She doesn't need Rachel." "But you wish she did." It wasn't a question. Lucas glanced at Adriana, surprised by her perception. "Yeah," he admitted. "I wish Emma had a mom who wanted to be her mom. I wish she didn't have to grow up wondering why she wasn't enough to make Rachel stay. But wishing doesn't change reality." "No," Adriana said quietly. "It doesn't." They fell silent again, but it was heavier now, weighted with shared understanding of how people could fail you in the most fundamental ways. "What about you?" Lucas asked. "You ever want kids?" "I thought I did. Once, before I took over the company." She changed lanes smoothly, passing a truck hauling logs. But then work became everything. 18-hour days, constant travel, board meetings and strategy sessions, and putting out fires. I told myself there'd be time later. And then later became now, and I'm 35 and alone and fighting for scraps of a life I built, but apparently never actually owned. "You're not alone," Lucas said. "I know. I have you." She said it simply, like a fact, and Lucas felt something warm settle in his chest. "For what it's worth, I think you'd be a good mom. You're patient, thoughtful, and you don't give up, which is basically 90% of parenting." Adriana laughed, surprised. "That's quite an endorsement coming from someone who's known me less than a week." "Sometimes a week is enough." She glanced at him, and their eyes met for a moment before she had to return her attention to the road. But something passed between them in that glance. Recognition, maybe, or possibility. They reached Pittsburgh just before 11, the city rising up in steel and glass against the gray sky. Adriana navigated downtown with the ease of someone who knew every street, every shortcut, every way to avoid traffic. She parked in a garage beneath a sleek office tower, and they took an elevator to the 23rd floor where Morrison and Associates occupied a corner suite with views that probably cost more per month than Lucas's mortgage. The receptionist was young and polished, wearing a headset and typing at a computer with the kind of speed that suggested she could probably take down dictation in real time. "Adriana Voss for James Morrison," Adriana said, and her voice had shifted into something more formal, professional, the CEO voice. "Of course, Ms. Voss. He's expecting you." "And your associate?" "Lucas Reed," Lucas said before Adriana could answer. The receptionist typed something, then gestured toward a hallway. "Conference room 3. Mr. Morrison will be with you shortly." The conference room was all dark wood and leather chairs, a table that could seat 12 easily, and windows that looked out over the city. Lucas stood at the glass, watching traffic crawl through intersections far below, while Adriana unpacked her laptop and the sheaf of documents they'd printed that morning. "You nervous?" he asked. "Terrified," she admitted. "Morrison has a reputation for being brutal in negotiations. If he thinks my case isn't strong enough, he'll tell me to walk." "Your case is strong." "We'll see." The door opened, and James Morrison walked in. He was exactly what Lucas expected from a high-powered corporate attorney. Mid-50s, silver hair, a suit that probably cost more than Lucas's truck, and eyes that missed nothing. He shook Adriana's hand first, then Lucas's, his grip firm but not aggressive. "Ms. Voss, Mr. Reed, thank you for coming in." He settled into a chair at the head of the table, opening a folder that was already thick with documents. "I've reviewed what you sent this morning. It's quite a mess Marcus Holloway has created." "Can you help me fix it?" Adriana asked directly. Morrison smiled, and it was the smile of a shark who'd just smelled blood. "Ms. Voss, I don't fix messes. I destroy the people who make them. The question is whether you have the stomach for what that requires." "Try me." For the next 2 hours, Morrison walked them through the legal strategy. It was dense, complicated, and involved words like injunction and discovery and fiduciary duty that made Lucas's head spin. But the core of it was simple. They were going to sue Marcus Holloway for fraud, breach of contract, and misappropriation of funds. They were going to freeze his assets. They were going to depose every board member who'd voted against Adriana. And they were going to make sure the whole thing played out in public, where Marcus's reputation would be shredded along with his bank account. "This won't be quick," Morrison warned, "and it won't be clean. Holloway will fight back with everything he has. He'll drag your name through the mud, question your competence, probably try to paint you as an unstable woman who couldn't handle the pressure." "Let him try," Adriana said, and there was steel in her voice. Morrison nodded approvingly. "Good, because the moment we file, this becomes war, and wars get ugly." "I'm ready." "Then let's get started." Morrison slid a contract across the table, the retention agreement. Standard contingency arrangement. We take 30% of whatever we recover plus costs. If we win, you get your company back and I get paid. If we lose, you owe me nothing except the filing fees and administrative costs. Adriana read through the contract carefully, taking her time, despite the fact that Morrison was clearly a man used to people signing on the spot. Lucas watched her face, saw the moment she made her decision, and felt a surge of pride that surprised him with its intensity. She signed with a flourish, then slid the contract back. "When do we file?" she asked. "Monday morning. That gives us the weekend to finalize the complaint and prepare for the media storm that'll follow." Morrison stood, signaling the meeting was over. "In the meantime, stay low. Don't contact anyone from the company. Don't post on social media. Don't do anything that could be used against you." "Understood." They shook hands again, and Morrison walked them to the elevator. "Miss Voss," he said as the doors opened, "I've been doing this for 30 years, and I can tell you with certainty that you have one of the strongest fraud cases I've ever seen. Marcus Holloway made a lot of mistakes. We're going to make him pay for every single one." The elevator ride down was silent, both of them processing what had just happened. It wasn't until they were back in the car, pulling out of the parking garage into downtown traffic, that Adriana finally spoke. "I can't believe that just happened." "Believe it. You just hired a shark. A very expensive shark. Worth every penny if he delivers." Adriana navigated through the city, but instead of heading toward the highway, she turned down a familiar street. Lucas recognized the neighborhood, trendy cafes and boutique shops, old buildings that had been converted into lofts and galleries. "Where are we going?" he asked. "Somewhere I need to see before we leave." She pulled into a parking spot in front of a tall brick building with industrial windows and a doorman who looked like he could double as a bouncer. "My apartment, or what used to be my apartment." "I thought you said the locks were changed." "They were, but I need to see it anyway. Need to remind myself what I'm fighting for." She killed the engine and sat there for a moment, staring up at the building. "Will you come with me?" "Of course." The doorman recognized her immediately, his professional smile slipping into something more genuine. "Ms. Voss, I heard what happened. I'm sorry." "Thank you, Carlos. Is the building manager in?" "Mr. Peterson?" "Yeah, he's in his office." They found Peterson, a nervous man in his 40s with a comb-over and a tie that didn't quite match his shirt, behind a desk piled with paperwork. He stood when Adriana entered, his expression caught between sympathy and legal liability. "Ms. Voss, I didn't expect to see you." "I need to get into my apartment, Mr. Peterson." "I'm afraid I can't do that. Mr. Holloway's attorney sent over a court order. Until the ownership dispute is resolved, the apartment is sealed." "I don't want to take anything. I just want to see it." Peterson shifted uncomfortably. "I really shouldn't—" "5 minutes," Adriana said. "That's all I'm asking. You can stand there and watch the whole time if you want." Peterson looked at Lucas as if expecting him to provide some kind of out. Lucas just shrugged. "Fine," Peterson said finally. 5 minutes. But I'm coming with you, and you're not touching anything." They took the elevator to the 18th floor, Peterson using a master key to open the door to what had been Adriana's home. Lucas stepped inside and understood immediately why she'd needed to see this. The apartment was spectacular. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city, hardwood floors that gleamed even in the gray afternoon light, modern furniture that looked like it came from magazines, art on the walls that was probably worth more than Lucas made in a year. But it was also cold, impersonal, like a hotel suite rather than a home. Adriana walked through slowly, touching nothing as promised, but her eyes took in everything. Lucas followed, watching her face as she processed what she'd lost. "I bought this place 7 years ago," she said quietly, "right after I took over the company, paid cash. It was supposed to be my sanctuary." "Was it?" Lucas asked. "No, it was just another thing I owned but didn't really have." She stopped in front of the windows, looking out over Pittsburgh. "I worked 16-hour days and came home to this empty apartment and told myself I was building something meaningful. But what's the point of building an empire if you're alone in it?" "You're not alone anymore." She turned to look at him, and Lucas saw tears in her eyes that she refused to let fall. "No," she agreed. "I'm not." Peterson cleared his throat. "Time's up, Ms. Voss." They left the apartment, the door clicking shut with a finality that felt symbolic. Back in the elevator, descending through the building, Adriana was quiet. But when they reached the lobby, she stopped and looked back one more time. "I'm going to get it back," she said, and it wasn't hope in her voice. It was certainty. Not because I need this apartment or any of the things in it, but because it's mine and Marcus Holloway doesn't get to take it. Damn right he doesn't, Lucas said. They drove back to Cedar Falls in the gathering dusk, the sky turning purple and orange at the edges. Adriana seemed lighter somehow, like confronting what she'd lost had freed something inside her. They talked about everything and nothing, her college years, his time in the Marines, favorite movies and books, and the kind of music they listened to when no one else was around. Lucas learned that Adriana had wanted to be an architect before her father died, that she played piano but hadn't touched one in years, that she was terrified of spiders but had once gone skydiving on a dare. Adriana learned that Lucas had proposed to Rachel on a beach in California during leave, that he'd thought they were happy right up until the moment she left, that he still sometimes woke up expecting to find Emma was just a dream. By the time they pulled into Cedar Falls, it was full dark, and Lucas felt like he'd known Adriana for years instead of days. "Thank you for coming with me," she said as they parked behind the garage. "Thanks for bringing me. That was—" He paused, searching for the right word. "Educational." She laughed. "Educational. That's one way to describe watching someone hire a lawyer to destroy their former business partner. I was going to say it was good to see you in your element. You're different when you're fighting. Different how? Stronger, more yourself." They sat in the car for a moment, neither quite ready to break the spell of the day. Then Adriana's phone buzzed, shattering the moment. She checked it, and her expression shifted. "It's Sam. He says Marcus knows someone accessed the server. Can he trace it to you?" Sam says no. The access logs show it came from an external VPN that bounced through 3 countries. But Marcus is paranoid now. He's ordering a full security audit. Will that be a problem? Only if they find something we missed. But Sam's good. He covered our tracks. She texted back quickly, then set the phone down. "Morrison files on Monday. We just need to stay quiet until then." "Speaking of staying quiet, Emma wants to meet you tomorrow." "Right, your daughter." Adriana smiled nervously. "Any advice on how to handle an 8-year-old interrogation?" "Be honest. She has a built-in lie detector. And don't be surprised if she asks if you're going to marry me. She's been on that kick lately." "What should I tell her?" "Whatever you want. Just know that whatever you say, she'll tell everyone at school on Monday." Adriana laughed, and the sound was lighter than Lucas had heard from her before. "No pressure then." They climbed the stairs to the loft, and Lucas was struck by how natural it felt. Like they'd been doing this for years, coming home together, talking through the day, settling into a routine that felt comfortable despite being completely new. "I should probably head home," Lucas said, though he made no move to leave. "Let you get some rest. Or you could stay. We could order pizza. Watch something mindless on that tiny TV you've got down there." She paused. "Unless you need to get back." "Emma's at Maggie's, and I already closed the garage for tomorrow, so no, I don't need to get back." "Then stay." It wasn't romantic. It wasn't even particularly significant, but it felt like something was shifting between them, something neither of them was ready to name, but both of them could feel. They ordered pizza from the only place in Cedar Falls that delivered, Marco's, which had been making the same mediocre pizza for 30 years, and would probably be making it for 30 more. They ate sitting on the floor of the loft because the couch wasn't big enough for 2, and the workbench was covered in legal documents. Lucas found an old Western on cable, the kind with sweeping landscapes and simple morality and shootouts that were more ballet than violence. Adriana fell asleep halfway through, her head dropping onto Lucas's shoulder like it was the most natural thing in the world. He sat there, barely breathing, afraid to move and wake her. Outside, Cedar Falls settled into its small-town rhythm, cars heading home, porch lights coming on, the world shrinking to manageable size. Lucas thought about the day, about watching Adriana transform from the broken woman in his parking lot into the CEO who'd stared down one of Pittsburgh's most powerful attorneys without blinking, about standing in her empty apartment and understanding just how much she'd sacrificed for a company that had turned on her the moment she showed vulnerability. He thought about Emma and how she'd react to meeting Adriana, about Maggie's warnings and his own uncertainty about what he was doing and why. But mostly he thought about how right this felt, how sitting here with Adriana asleep against his shoulder felt more real than anything had in years. His phone buzzed quietly. A text from Maggie. Emma's asking about tomorrow again. You bringing your friend? Lucas looked down at Adriana, at the woman who'd walked into his life bleeding and desperate and had somehow become someone he couldn't imagine walking back out. He typed back, "Yeah, tomorrow at noon. Tell Emma to be ready." Maggie's response came immediately. "This is really happening, isn't it?" Lucas wasn't sure what this was, but whatever it was, yes, it was really happening. He set his phone aside and let his head rest against the wall. Adriana's weight warm and steady against him, and for the first time in 8 years, Lucas Reed allowed himself to imagine that maybe, possibly, he didn't have to do everything alone. The Western played itself out to the inevitable happy ending, credits rolling over a sunset that promised peace and resolution and all the things real life rarely delivered. Lucas didn't believe in happy endings. Not really. Life was too messy for that. Too complicated. But he was starting to believe in the possibility of something better. And maybe, for now, that was enough. Lucas woke with a crick in his neck and Adriana still asleep against his shoulder. Dawn was breaking through the loft windows, painting everything in shades of gray and gold. He'd somehow managed to doze off, sitting upright against the wall, and now his entire left side was numb. He shifted carefully, trying not to wake her, but Adriana's eyes opened immediately, that same military alertness he'd noticed before. "Sorry," she murmured, pulling away and running a hand through her hair. "I didn't mean to fall asleep on you." "It's fine." Better than fine, actually. Lucas stood, stretching until his spine cracked in 3 places. "But I'm getting too old to sleep sitting up." "What time is it?" "A little after 6. Adriana checked her phone, scrolling through what looked like a dozen new emails. Her expression darkened with each swipe. "What's wrong?" Lucas asked. "Marcus is making moves. He just sent a company-wide email announcing a restructuring plan, new partnerships, expansion into markets we'd specifically avoided because they were too risky." She read aloud, her voice tight with anger. "We're entering an exciting new chapter at Voss Industries. Under dynamic new leadership, we're positioned to double our revenue within 18 months. She looked up. "He's already talking like I never existed." "He's trying to consolidate power before Morrison files on Monday." "I know, and it's working. Look at this." She turned the phone toward him, showing a thread of responses from employees. "Congratulations. Excited for the future. This is exactly what the company needs. They're buying it. They think he's a hero." "They don't know what you know." "That won't matter if he gets too entrenched. The longer this takes, the harder it'll be to undo the damage." She stood abruptly, pacing the small space. "I need to call Morrison. See if there's any way to expedite the filing." "It's Saturday. You think he's working?" Men like James Morrison never stop working. She dialed anyway, and Lucas heard it go to voicemail. Adriana left a message, professional, controlled, but Lucas could hear the urgency underneath, and hung up. He'll call back. He has to. In the meantime, we've got a more immediate problem. "What's that?" "Emma. She's expecting to meet you in 6 hours, and you look like you haven't slept in a week." Adriana glanced at her reflection in the dark laptop screen and grimaced. "Point taken. Is there somewhere I can shower?" "There's a gym 2 blocks down, 24-hour access. I've got a membership I never use." "Perfect." She grabbed the small duffel bag she'd been living out of. Lucas had no idea where she'd gotten it, but suspected she'd bought basics at the Target in the next town over. "Give me an hour." She left, and Lucas spent the time cleaning up the loft and trying to figure out how to explain Adriana to his daughter. The truth was complicated. The lie was easier, but felt wrong. He settled on something in between. Adriana was a friend who needed help, who was going through a hard time, and who might be around for a while. Emma would ask follow-up questions. She always did. But Lucas would deal with those as they came. His phone rang just after 7. Morrison, returning Adriana's call. "Mr. Reed? James Morrison. Is Ms. Voss available?" She stepped out. "Can I take a message?" "Tell her I received her voicemail. Tell her also that I understand her urgency, but rushing the filing would be a tactical error. Marcus Holloway is expecting us to panic. We won't give him the satisfaction." Morrison's voice was crisp, authoritative. "We file Monday as planned. In the meantime, she should focus on staying calm and staying invisible. Can you relay that?" "I can." "Good. One more thing, Mr. Reed. You're doing excellent work keeping Miss Voss grounded. She needs someone in her corner who isn't billing by the hour. Don't underestimate the value of that. The call ended before Lucas could respond. He stood there holding his phone, processing the fact that a high-powered Pittsburgh attorney had just thanked him for being a friend. Adriana returned 45 minutes later, hair wet, wearing clean jeans and a sweater that actually fit. She looked more like herself, or at least more like the version of herself Lucas was getting to know. Morrison called back, he said, relaying the message. He's right. I know he's right, but waiting feels impossible. So don't wait. Work on something else. Build the case. Prepare for what comes after Monday. What comes after Monday is war. Then prepare for war. She smiled at that, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. You're good at this, you know. Good at what? Keeping me from spiraling. Every time I start to panic, you say exactly what I need to hear. That's not skill. That's just common sense. Maybe. But it's exactly what I need right now. They spent the morning working in comfortable silence. Adriana on her laptop, Lucas catching up on paperwork for the garage. At 11:30, Lucas's phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. We're ready when you are. Emma's vibrating with excitement. Lucas showed the message to Adriana. Last chance to back out. Not a chance. I've faced hostile shareholders and corporate raiders. I can handle one 8-year-old. Famous last words. They drove to Maggie's house in Lucas's truck because Adriana's Mercedes felt too conspicuous for a casual family lunch. The neighborhood was quiet, tree-lined streets with houses that had been built in the 70s and maintained with varying degrees of success. Maggie's place was near the end of the block, a split level with a tire swing in the front yard and a minivan in the driveway. Emma must have been watching from the window because the front door flew open before they even reached the porch. She came barreling out, all wild hair and gap-toothed grin, and launched herself at Lucas. Dad, you brought her! Easy, kiddo. Let me at least get out of the driveway first. Emma turned her attention to Adriana, studying her with the unfiltered curiosity only children possess. You're really pretty. Are you Dad's girlfriend? Emma, Lucas warned. What? Sophie's mom said you were having breakfast with a pretty lady at the diner. I just want to know if it's true. Adriana crouched down to Emma's eye level, and Lucas watched his daughter's posture shift from suspicious to intrigued. My name is Adriana, she said, and your dad and I are friends. Is that okay? I guess. Do you like him? Emma, I do like him, Adriana said, cutting off Lucas's protest. He's been very kind to me when I needed help. What kind of help? The grown-up kind. Not very interesting. Emma considered this, then apparently decided Adriana had passed whatever test she'd been administering. Want to see my room? I have a new Lego set. I'd love to. Maggie appeared in the doorway, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She gave Lucas a look that said, we're talking about this later, then smiled at Adriana. You must be the mysterious friend. I'm Maggie, Lucas's sister. Adriana Voss, thank you for having me. Any friend of Lucas's is welcome, even if he's being weirdly secretive about the whole thing. Another pointed look at her brother. Come on in. Lunch is almost ready. The house was chaos incarnate. Emma's cousins were running through the living room playing some game that involved a lot of shrieking. Dave was in the kitchen burning something that smelled like burgers, and a basketball game played on the TV that no one was watching. Emma dragged Adriana upstairs to see her Lego creation, a sprawling castle that looked like it had been designed by someone on a caffeine high, while Maggie cornered Lucas in the kitchen. All right, spill. Who is she really? I told you. A friend who needed help. Lucas, I've known you your entire life. You don't bring women around Emma. You barely date. And now you show up with someone who looks like she stepped out of a fashion magazine and you expect me to believe you're just helping her out of the goodness of your heart. That's exactly what I'm doing. So there's nothing else going on? Lucas thought about falling asleep with Adriana's head on his shoulder, about the drive to Pittsburgh and the way they'd talked for hours without running out of things to say, about the look in her eyes when she'd thanked him for not letting her be alone. I don't know what's going on, he admitted, but whatever it is, it's not what you're thinking. What am I thinking? That I'm getting in over my head, that I'm going to get hurt, that Emma's going to get attached to someone who's going to leave. Maggie's expression softened. Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking. I'm being careful. Are you? Because from where I'm standing, careful would have been dropping her at a hotel and wishing her luck, not letting her stay in your garage and driving to Pittsburgh with her and bringing her to family lunch. She needed someone, Maggie, and I was there. You're always there for everyone except yourself. She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. I love that about you, but I also know it means you give pieces of yourself away until there's nothing left. Don't do that with her. I won't. Promise me. I promise. Maggie didn't look convinced, but she let it go. Fine, but if she breaks your heart, I reserve the right to say I told you so. Deal. Lunch was burgers. Dave had managed to save them from complete incineration, and an explosion of side dishes that Maggie had clearly been cooking since dawn. They ate at the dining room table, which was too small for 8 people, but somehow accommodated everyone anyway. Emma monopolized Adriana's attention, asking a million questions about everything from her favorite color to whether she'd ever been to Disney World. Adriana handled it with grace, answering honestly without talking down to her. Do you have kids? Emma asked around a mouthful of potato salad. Emma, don't talk with your mouth full, Lucas said automatically. No, Adriana said. I don't have kids. Why not? Emma, it's okay, Adriana said. She looked at Emma with something like wistfulness. I was always too busy with work. I kept thinking there'd be time later. Is it too late now? I don't know, maybe. My mom left because she didn't want to be a mom anymore, Emma said matter-of-factly. But Dad says that's her loss because I'm awesome. Lucas felt his throat tighten. He'd said that to Emma 100 times, trying to make her understand that Rachel's leaving wasn't her fault. But hearing his daughter repeat it back like gospel broke something in him. Your dad is absolutely right, Adriana said softly. You are awesome. Emma beamed, then turned to Lucas. I like her, Dad. Can she stay? We'll see, kiddo. After lunch, Emma insisted on showing Adriana the backyard, where she'd been building what she called a fairy garden, but which looked more like a collection of rocks and sticks arranged in a vaguely circular pattern. Lucas watched from the deck as Adriana crouched next to his daughter, listening intently as Emma explained the complex mythology she'd created for the imaginary fairies who apparently lived there. Adriana asked questions, made suggestions, and at one point actually got down on her hands and knees to help arrange a particularly stubborn stick into place. She's good with her, Dave said, appearing beside Lucas with 2 beers. He handed one to Lucas. Natural. Yeah, she is. Maggie's worried. I know. Should she be? Lucas took a long drink of beer, watching Adriana laugh at something Emma said. Probably, but I'm doing it anyway. Fair enough. Just don't screw it up. Emma's getting attached. So am I. Dave clapped him on the shoulder. Then I guess you better make sure this works out. They stayed until late afternoon, Emma extracting a promise from Adriana that she'd come back soon to help finish the fairy garden. The drive back to the garage was quiet, both of them processing the day. Thank you for bringing me, Adriana said finally. I haven't had a family lunch in years. I forgot what it felt like. What does it feel like? Normal. Like maybe I'm more than just the sum of my mistakes and my work. You were always more than that. You just forgot for a while. She looked at him, and Lucas felt that shift again, the sense that something was building between them, invisible but undeniable. Emma's wonderful, Adriana said. You're doing an incredible job with her. I'm doing my best. Some days that feels like enough. Other days, not so much. She adores you. Anyone can see that. The feeling's mutual. They pulled into the garage just as Lucas's phone rang. An unfamiliar number with a Pittsburgh area code. Hello? Mr. Reed, this is Sam Patel. I worked with Adriana at Voss Industries. Lucas put the phone on speaker. Sam? What's going on? Is Adriana there? I need to talk to her. It's urgent. Adriana leaned toward the phone. I'm here, Sam. What's wrong? Marcus knows. About the server access, about the files you downloaded. I don't know how, but he knows it was you. Adriana's face went white. How is that possible? You said the VPN was untraceable. It was. It should have been. But he's got IT security doing a forensic audit, and they found something. I don't know what, but they're building a case that you illegally accessed company property. The company that I built, Adriana said, anger cutting through the fear. The company that's legally still partially mine. I know, but Marcus doesn't care about legalities. He's going to file charges. Corporate espionage, theft of trade secrets. He's already contacted the police. When? This afternoon. I wanted to warn you before... Sam's voice dropped to a whisper. Before they come looking for you. Lucas felt ice settle in his stomach. Come looking for her where? I don't know, but Marcus has resources. If he wants to find Adriana, he will. Adriana's hands were shaking. Lucas reached over and took one, squeezing it. Thank you, Sam, she said, for warning us, and for everything else. I'm sorry I couldn't do more. Good luck. The call ended, leaving them sitting in the truck in the gathering darkness. This changes everything, Adriana said quietly. Not necessarily. Morrison files on Monday anyway. This just moves up the timeline. Lucas, Marcus is accusing me of corporate espionage. That's a federal crime. I could go to jail. You won't, because what you took was evidence of his fraud. You didn't steal trade secrets. You documented crimes. Try telling that to the police when they show up. Lucas thought fast, his military training kicking in. Strategy, contingencies, worst-case scenarios. Call Morrison, tell him what happened, see what he advises. Adriana dialed with shaking fingers. Morrison answered on the second ring. Ms. Voss, I was just about to call you. You've heard. I have contacts in the Pittsburgh PD. They issued a warrant for your arrest an hour ago. Corporate espionage, unauthorized access to computer systems. It's a fishing expedition, but it's official. What do I do? Nothing. You do absolutely nothing. Don't turn yourself in. Don't contact the police. Don't leave wherever you are. Morrison's voice was steel-wrapped in velvet. This is exactly the move I expected from Holloway. He's trying to force your hand, make you react emotionally. We're not going to give him that satisfaction. But there's a warrant, which will be invalidated the moment we file our complaint on Monday and demonstrate that you were gathering evidence of fraud, not stealing trade secrets. But until then, you need to stay invisible. How am I supposed to do that? If the police are looking for me, are you somewhere safe right now? Adriana looked at Lucas, who nodded. Yes, she said. Then stay there. Don't use your credit cards. Don't access your email from your personal devices. Don't do anything that leaves a digital trail. Can you do that? I can. Good. I'll file an emergency motion first thing Monday morning. We'll beat this, Ms. Voss, but you need to trust me and follow my instructions exactly. I will. And Mr. Reed, you're still there? I'm here, Lucas said. Keep her safe, keep her calm, and keep her out of sight. I'm counting on you. The call ended and they sat in the darkness of the truck, the weight of what was happening settling over them like snow. I should leave, Adriana said finally. This isn't your problem. I won't let you get arrested for harboring a fugitive or whatever they charge you with. You're not a fugitive. You're someone fighting back against a guy who screwed you over. There's a difference. Not in the eyes of the law. Then the law's got it wrong. Lucas turned in his seat to face her. You're not running. You're not turning yourself in. You're staying right here where you're safe until Morrison fixes this. Lucas, no arguments. This is my garage, my town, and my decision. You're staying. She looked at him, and he saw the moment her fear transformed into something else. Determination. The same fire he'd seen when she'd signed Morrison's contract. Okay, she said. I'll stay, he said. They went inside, locking the garage doors behind them, suddenly hyper-aware of every car that drove past, every shadow that moved in the parking lot. Lucas pulled the shades in the loft, turned off all but one small lamp, and did a mental inventory of what they'd need if Adriana had to hide here for an extended period. We need to ditch your car, he said. The Mercedes is too recognizable. Where would we put it? Dave has a barn on his property, stores his boat there in the winter. He'll let us use it, no questions asked. You trust him? With my life, with Emma's life. Yeah, I trust him. Lucas called his brother-in-law, explained that he needed to store a car for a few days and couldn't explain why. Dave asked one question, is Emma safe? And when Lucas said yes, that was the end of the discussion. They drove the Mercedes to Dave's property after dark. Lucas following in his truck. The barn was exactly what he'd expected, old, dusty, smelling of motor oil and dried leaves. They covered the car with a tarp, and Dave handed Lucas the padlock key. "Don't tell me anything," Dave said. "That way if someone asks, I can honestly say I don't know." "Thanks, man. Just don't make me regret this." Back at the garage, Lucas and Adriana established what felt like a siege mentality. Curtains drawn, phones on silent, constant awareness of their surroundings. Adriana couldn't work on her laptop, too risky to create a digital footprint, so instead she worked on paper, building timelines and strategies with pen and legal pads. "Tell me about your father," Lucas said around midnight, when the silence was getting too heavy. "You said he taught you to weld." Adriana looked up from her notes, surprised by the question. "Why do you want to know?" "Because sitting here in the dark, waiting for Monday is going to drive us both crazy, and I'd rather talk to you than worry." She set down her pen, leaning back against the wall. "My father was the best man I ever knew, honest to a fault. Believed that if you treated people with dignity and paid them fairly, they'd move mountains for you." Sounds like he was right. He was. The factory workers loved him. When he died, 300 people showed up to his funeral. Half of them brought food to the house afterward. Casseroles, pies, things their grandmothers had taught them to make. It took us a week to eat through it all. That's a good legacy. It was, and I tried to honor it, kept his philosophy, his values, made sure everyone who worked for me knew they mattered. Her voice cracked slightly. And then Marcus turned them against me in an afternoon. He didn't turn them against you, he lied to them. There's a difference. Is there? The result's the same. The result's temporary. Once the truth comes out, they'll see who Marcus really is. Maybe. Or maybe they'll just see me as the woman who couldn't hold on to her own company. Lucas moved to sit beside her, their shoulders touching in the small space. "You know what I see when I look at you?" "What?" "Someone who got knocked down hard and got back up anyway. Someone who's fighting even when it would be easier to quit. That's not weakness, Adriana. That's the opposite." She turned to look at him, and in the dim lamplight, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "How do you do that?" she asked softly. "Do what?" "Make me feel like maybe I'm not completely broken." "Because you're not. You're just going through hell, but you'll come out the other side." "Will I?" "Yeah. I've seen what you're made of. You're tougher than Marcus Holloway could ever be." She leaned into him then, resting her head on his shoulder like she had the night before. But this time it felt different, more intentional, more like a choice than a collapse. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not giving up on me." "Not a chance," Lucas said. "We're in this together now." They sat like that for a long time, the loft quiet except for the occasional car passing on the street below. Lucas thought about Monday, about Morrison filing the complaint, about what would happen when everything became public. But mostly, he thought about the woman beside him and the strange, unexpected path that had brought them together. A week ago, he'd been a mechanic with a simple life, and no complications beyond making sure Emma had clean clothes for school. Now he was harboring someone with an arrest warrant, planning legal strategies with corporate attorneys, and feeling things he hadn't felt since before Rachel left. It was terrifying. It was also the most alive he'd felt in years. "Lucas?" Adriana said, her voice drowsy. "Yeah? I'm glad I showed up at your garage that night." "Me too. Even with everything that's happened?" "Especially because of everything that's happened." She didn't respond, but he felt her hand find his in the darkness, their fingers interlacing like they'd been doing it for years instead of days. Outside, Cedar Falls slept. Inside the garage, two people who'd been strangers a week ago sat in the dark and waited for Monday, holding on to each other in the fragile hope that sometimes, when everything falls apart, you find exactly what you need in the wreckage. Sunday crawled by with the kind of slowness that made every hour feel like 3. Lucas kept the garage closed, the shades drawn, and checked his phone obsessively for updates that never came. Adriana paced the loft like a caged animal, unable to work, unable to rest, caught in the limbo between crisis and resolution. "You need to eat something," Lucas said around 2 in the afternoon, watching her wear a path in the plywood floor. "I'm not hungry." "Didn't ask if you were hungry." She stopped pacing long enough to give him a look that was half exasperation, half gratitude. You keep saying that. Because it keeps being true. He pulled out his phone. I'm ordering Chinese from that place on Route 9. You want the usual? We don't have a usual. We've known each other for a week. Sesame chicken, fried rice, extra egg rolls. That's what you ordered last time. That was one time. So I'm observant. He placed the order before she could argue. 30 minutes. Adriana returned to pacing, but Lucas noticed she'd relaxed fractionally. He'd learned her tells over the past week, the way she chewed her lower lip when she was thinking, how her hands shook when she was scared but her voice stayed steady, the fact that she could go hours without eating when she was focused, but would devour an entire meal once someone put food in front of her. He'd learned other things too, that she hummed when she worked, always the same melody he couldn't quite place, that she slept curled up like a child despite her sharp edges during the day, that she laughed at terrible puns but rolled her eyes at carefully crafted jokes. He'd learned that somewhere in the past week, Adriana Voss had stopped being a stranger and become someone he couldn't imagine not knowing. His phone buzzed. A text from Maggie. Emma keeps asking when Adriana's coming back. What should I tell her? Lucas glanced at Adriana, who was staring out the window at the street below, watching for threats that probably weren't coming, but might be. He typed back, "Tell her soon, I hope." The Chinese food arrived, and they ate sitting on the floor of the loft because it had become their spot somehow. Adriana picked at her sesame chicken, managing maybe a third of it before setting the container aside. "Tell me something," she said suddenly. "What do you want to know? When Rachel left, how did you keep going? How did you not just fall apart?" Lucas set down his own food, considering the question. "I didn't have a choice. Emma needed me to be okay, so I was okay, or I pretended to be until the pretending became real. But you must have been angry, hurt. I was furious for months. Every time Emma asked where her mom was, every time I had to explain to someone new that it was just us, every milestone Rachel missed, I wanted to find her and make her understand what she'd thrown away." He picked up an egg roll, then put it back down. "But anger's exhausting. Eventually I had to choose between staying angry or moving forward. I chose forward. How? By focusing on what I had instead of what I lost. I had Emma, I had the garage, I had Maggie and Dave. That was enough." Is it? Enough? Lucas thought about the question, really thought about it. A week ago, he would have said yes without hesitation. His life was small, but complete. Manageable. Safe. Now, sitting in a loft with a woman wanted by the police, planning legal strategies against corporate executives, feeling things that terrified and exhilarated him in equal measure, he wasn't sure anymore. "I thought it was," he said finally. "But maybe I was just afraid to want more." Adriana met his eyes, and something passed between them that felt like recognition. "I spent 7 years building an empire," she said quietly. "Working 80-hour weeks, sacrificing everything for quarterly earnings and market share. I told myself it was worth it because I was honoring my father's legacy. But the truth is, I was hiding." From what? From the fact that I was lonely. That success didn't fill the holes it was supposed to fill. That I'd traded a life for a company, and the company won. She looked down at her hands. And then Marcus took even that away, and I realized I had nothing. No company, no friends, no one who cared if I disappeared. That's not true. Isn't it? I had 300 employees, and not one of them called to check on me after I was fired. I had a phone full of contacts, and the only person who answered when I needed help was Sam, and even he could only do it in secret. You have me now. I know, and I'm terrified of what that means. Lucas moved closer, close enough that their knees touched. Why? Because what happens when this is over? When Morrison wins the case and I get my company back? I go back to Pittsburgh, back to that empty apartment, back to the life that broke me in the first place. And you stay here with Emma and the garage and your small-town life. We go back to being strangers. We could never be strangers, not after this. Then what would we be? It was the question Lucas had been avoiding for days. The one that kept him awake at night, lying in his bed at home, or dozing in the chair downstairs, wondering what the hell he was doing and why it felt so right. I don't know, he admitted. But I know I don't want to find out what my life looks like without you in it. Adriana's breath caught, and for a moment neither of them moved. Then she leaned forward and kissed him. It was soft, tentative, like she was testing whether this was real or just another thing that would fall apart. Lucas kissed her back, careful and deliberate, and felt something slot into place that he hadn't known was missing. When they pulled apart, Adriana was crying. "I'm sorry," she said, wiping at her eyes. "I don't know why I'm crying." "Because you're exhausted and scared, and this whole situation is insane." "That's not why." "Then why?" "Because for the first time in 7 years, I feel like maybe I'm not completely alone. And that's terrifying." Lucas pulled her close, and she buried her face against his shoulder, her body shaking with tears she'd been holding back for too long. He held her while she cried, rubbing circles on her back, murmuring nonsense reassurances that probably didn't help but were all he had to offer. Eventually, the tears stopped. Adriana pulled back, embarrassed, but Lucas just handed her a napkin from the Chinese takeout. "Feel better?" he asked. "Weirdly, yes." She blew her nose, laughing despite herself. "I haven't cried like that since my father died. Sometimes you need to fall apart before you can put yourself back together." "Is that what I'm doing? Putting myself back together?" "I think you've been doing that since the night you showed up here. You just didn't realize it." She looked at him with something like wonder. "How did you get so wise?" 8 years of single parenting. You learn things." They cleaned up the remains of dinner, the mood lighter despite everything hanging over them. Lucas's phone rang just after 8. Morrison's name flashed on the screen. "It's him," Lucas said, putting it on speaker. "Mr. Reed, Miss Voss. I wanted to update you before tomorrow." Morrison's voice was energized in a way it hadn't been before. "I've reviewed the arrest warrant, and it's even weaker than I expected. The probable cause statement relies entirely on speculation and circumstantial evidence. No actual proof that Ms. Voss accessed anything she wasn't entitled to access." "So what does that mean?" Adriana asked. "It means when we file tomorrow, I'm also filing a motion to dismiss the warrant as baseless and retaliatory. We'll argue that Mr. Holloway is using law enforcement to harass a former business partner who discovered his fraud. Will it work?" "It should. Especially when we present the evidence you obtained showing systematic fraud and embezzlement. No judge wants to be on record protecting a criminal while prosecuting his victim." Lucas felt Adriana sag with relief beside him. "What time are you filing?" she asked. 9 a.m. sharp. I've already alerted several media outlets. By noon, Marcus Holloway's face will be on every news station in Pennsylvania, and the narrative will be about his fraud, not your supposed espionage." "Thank you, James. Thank me when we win. Until then, stay put and stay quiet. Tomorrow, we go to war." The call ended, and Adriana immediately started moving, pacing again but with purpose this time instead of anxiety. "We need to prepare for what comes next," she said. "Media questions, employee reactions, board members trying to save their own skins." "Tonight?" Lucas asked. "It's 8:30 on a Sunday night. You should rest." "I can't rest, not when we're this close." "Then at least let me help." They spent the next 3 hours going through scenarios, building talking points, anticipating every possible response from Marcus and the board. Lucas didn't understand half the corporate jargon, but he understood strategy, and he could see the chess game unfolding. Around midnight, exhaustion finally won. Adriana's words started slurring together, and Lucas physically took the laptop away from her. "Sleep," he ordered. "You're no good to anyone if you collapse tomorrow." "Fine. But wake me at 6. I want to be ready when Morrison files." "Deal." Lucas went downstairs to his usual chair, but he couldn't settle. His mind was racing, thinking about tomorrow, about what would happen when everything became public, about the future that was suddenly uncertain in ways both terrifying and exciting. He must have dozed off eventually because he woke to his phone ringing at 5:43 a.m. Morrison's name on the screen, which was wrong because Morrison wasn't supposed to call until after he filed. "Hello?" Lucas answered, fear spiking through him. "Turn on the news," Morrison said without preamble. "Channel 7, now." Lucas grabbed the remote for the small TV in the garage's office, fumbling with the channels until he found 7. The morning news was on, a perky anchor with perfect hair discussing local weather. Then the screen changed to breaking news, and Lucas's stomach dropped. Marcus Holloway's face filled the screen, followed by footage of federal agents entering the Voss Industries headquarters. Federal investigators raided Voss Industries early this morning, the anchor was saying, following allegations of widespread fraud and embezzlement. CEO Marcus Holloway was taken into custody at his home just after 5 a.m. Sources say the investigation has been ongoing for several months. Lucas ran upstairs, finding Adriana already awake, staring at her phone in shock. "Are you seeing this?" she asked. Morrison called, told me to turn on the news. They watched together as the story unfolded. Federal agents hauling boxes out of the headquarters. Employees standing in the parking lot, confused and scared. A statement from the U.S. Attorney's Office about corporate fraud, falsified financial statements, and wire fraud. Morrison called back at 6:15. "Well," he said, and Lucas could hear the satisfaction in his voice. "That's one way to start a Monday." "What happened?" Adriana demanded. "How did the feds get involved?" "Remember those shell companies you found, Vertex Solutions and the others? Turns out they weren't just hiding money. They were part of a larger scheme involving tax fraud and money laundering. When I sent a courtesy heads up to the U.S. Attorney's Office on Friday about our Monday filing, they fast-tracked their own investigation." "So Marcus is actually arrested? Like arrested? "Federal custody. He'll be arraigned this afternoon. The charges are serious, Ms. Voss. Wire fraud, tax evasion, money laundering. He's looking at 20 years minimum if convicted." Adriana sank onto the couch, and Lucas sat beside her, taking her hand. "What about the warrant for me?" she asked. "Withdrawn as of an hour ago. The Pittsburgh PD realized they'd been used as pawns in a corporate dispute and want nothing to do with it. You're clear." "And the company?" "In federal receivership pending investigation. But here's the interesting part. The board held an emergency meeting at 6 this morning. They've asked you to return as interim CEO while the situation is sorted out." Adriana was silent for a long moment. "They voted me out less than a week ago. They also realize their other option is watching the company collapse while their CEO sits in federal prison. You're the lesser evil. Or more accurately, you're the only one who can save them." "What if I say no?" Morrison was quiet for a beat. "That's entirely your choice, Ms. Voss. But may I offer some advice? Please. Go back, not for them. For the 300 employees who trusted your father and trusted you. For the company he built. Show Marcus Holloway and every board member who betrayed you that you're stronger than they ever imagined. Then, when you've stabilized everything, you can decide whether you want to stay or walk away on your own terms." Adriana looked at Lucas, questions in her eyes. "He's right," Lucas said quietly. "You need to finish this. Not because they deserve it, but because you do." She nodded slowly, decision crystallizing. "Okay. Tell the board I'll be there tomorrow morning." "Excellent. I'll send over the paperwork. And Ms. Voss, congratulations. You won." The call ended, and they sat in stunned silence as the enormity of what had just happened settled over them. "I won," Adriana repeated, like she couldn't quite believe it. "You won," Lucas confirmed. She started laughing then, a slightly hysterical sound that was equal parts relief and disbelief. Lucas laughed too, and they sat there on the couch in the loft above his garage, laughing like lunatics while the morning news continued reporting on Marcus Holloway's spectacular downfall. Eventually, the laughter faded, replaced by the reality of what came next. "I need to go back to Pittsburgh," Adriana said. "Pack, prepare, get ready to face the board tomorrow." "I know. Will you come with me?" "I know it's a lot to ask, but I don't want to do this alone." Lucas thought about the garage, about the customers he'd need to call, about Emma and Maggie, and the life that was waiting here in Cedar Falls. "Yeah," he said. "I'll come." They drove to Pittsburgh in the late morning, stopping first at Maggie's to explain where Lucas was going and why. Emma took the news of his overnight absence with surprising maturity, though she made him promise to bring Adriana back soon. "She promised to help with my fairy garden," Emma said seriously. "You can't break a promise to the fairies." "I wouldn't dream of it," Adriana said, crouching down to Emma's level. "I'll be back soon. I promise." The drive to Pittsburgh was different this time, less anxious, more contemplative. They talked about what Adriana would say to the board, how she'd handle the media, what her first moves as CEO would be. "I'm going to clean house," she said. "Every board member who voted against me, every executive who sided with Marcus, they're done. That's a lot of people to replace. I'll promote from within, the people who actually do the work, who've been overlooked because they didn't have the right degrees or connections. I'm going to rebuild this company the way my father would have wanted. He'd be proud of you. For fighting back. For winning." "I hope so." She glanced at him. "What about you? What happens when this is over?" "I go back to Cedar Falls, back to the garage, and Emma and my regular life." "Is that what you want?" Lucas didn't answer right away. A week ago, the answer would have been simple. Now everything felt complicated in ways both terrifying and necessary. "I want Emma to have stability," he said carefully. "I want her to grow up in a place where she feels safe and loved. Cedar Falls gives her that." "But what do you want? Not as a father, as Lucas." He thought about the question, really thought about it. "I want to know that when I helped you, it mattered, that you're going to be okay, that this wasn't just a week out of time, but something that changed both of us." It did change us. At least it changed me. She reached over, lacing her fingers through his. "I came to your garage broken and alone. I'm leaving stronger than I've been in years. That's because of you. You were always strong. You just needed to remember it." They reached Pittsburgh in the early afternoon. Adriana directed him to her building, where Carlos, the doorman, greeted her with genuine warmth. "Ms. Voss, I saw the news. That man, what he did. I hope they lock him up forever." "Me too, Carlos." The building manager had already received notice from the board that Adriana's apartment access was restored. They rode the elevator to the 18th floor, and Adriana unlocked the door with hands that only shook slightly. The apartment looked exactly the same as it had a few days ago, pristine, expensive, empty. "It's strange," Adriana said, walking through the space. "I lived here for 7 years, and it never felt like home. But the loft above your garage, that felt like home after 3 days." "Maybe home isn't about the space. Maybe it's about the people." She turned to look at him, and Lucas saw the same question in her eyes that had been haunting him since they'd kissed the night before. What happens now? Before either of them could answer, Adriana's phone rang. She checked it, then answered. "Sam, are you okay?" Lucas could hear Sam's excited voice through the speaker. "I'm fine, better than fine. The feds cleared me, said I cooperated with their investigation, and the board just called. They want me to stay on as IT director." "Are you going to?" "Only if you're coming back. I won't work for whoever they install if you say no. Tell them I'll be there tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. sharp. Thank you for everything. If you hadn't fought back, Marcus would still be running the company into the ground." After Sam hung up, more calls came. Employees congratulating her. Reporters requesting interviews. Former friends suddenly remembering they'd always believed in her. Adriana handled each call with grace, but Lucas could see the toll it was taking. By evening, she was exhausted again, the adrenaline of the morning's victory wearing off to reveal the deeper exhaustion underneath. "You need to eat," Lucas said, echoing their familiar pattern. "I'm not hungry, I know, but you need to eat anyway." They ordered pizza from a place Adriana knew, better than Marco's, but still recognizably pizza, and ate on the floor of her living room because neither of them felt comfortable with the formal dining table. "What are you going to do?" Adriana asked. "After I take over tomorrow, will you stay? For a day or two, make sure you're settled. But then I need to get back to Emma." "I understand." She set down her pizza, appetite gone. "Lucas, these past few days, they've meant everything to me. You know that, right?" "I know. I don't want this to end, whatever this is." "It doesn't have to end. We're 2 hours apart. That's nothing." 2 hours is a lifetime when you have an 8-year-old and a business to run. "So we figure it out. People do long distance all the time." "Do they? Successfully?" Lucas didn't have an answer for that. He wanted to say yes, wanted to promise her that they'd make it work, that distance didn't matter when the connection was real. But he'd made promises before, to Rachel, to himself, to Emma, and some of them had broken despite his best intentions. "I don't know," he said honestly, "but I know I want to try." Adriana moved closer until she was sitting beside him, her head on his shoulder. I'm scared. Of what? Of going back to who I was before, of letting work consume me again, of losing this, whatever this is between us, because I'm too busy or too focused or too damaged to make it work. You're not damaged. You're just hurt. There's a difference. How do you always know the right thing to say? I don't. I'm making this up as I go, same as you. They sat in silence for a while, eating pizza and watching the sun set over Pittsburgh through those floor-to-ceiling windows. Lucas thought about Cedar Falls, about the garage waiting for him, about Emma's fairy garden and Maggie's worried looks, and the life he'd built from the wreckage of Rachel's leaving. He thought about how easy it would be to go back to that life. How safe. He also thought about how empty it would feel now that he knew what it was like to sit with Adriana in the quiet moments, to watch her transform from broken to fierce, to feel like he was part of something bigger than just surviving day to day. I have an idea, he said suddenly. What kind of idea? A crazy one, maybe stupid, but hear me out. Okay. What if you didn't come back full time? What if you set up a leadership team you trust? People like Sam who actually care about the company, and you transition to being more of a chairman than a day-to-day CEO. Adriana pulled back to look at him. Why would I do that? Because you just got your life back. Don't immediately hand it over to the same thing that almost destroyed you. Build something different, something sustainable. I can't just abandon the company, not after fighting so hard to get it back. I'm not saying abandon it. I'm saying find a balance. Come to Pittsburgh when you need to. Work from wherever you want the rest of the time. Give yourself permission to have a life outside of quarterly earnings. She was quiet for a long moment, considering. You mean work from Cedar Falls? I mean work from wherever makes you happy. If that's Cedar Falls, then yeah. There's space in the loft, fast internet now that I know we need it, and a fairy garden that requires expert consultation. Lucas, I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. But I also know that the past week has felt more real than the past 8 years of my life. And I think you feel it too. Adriana's eyes were bright with tears again, but this time they were different, hopeful instead of scared. I do feel it, she whispered. I'm just terrified of screwing it up. So we'll screw it up together, make mistakes, figure it out as we go, but at least we won't be alone. She kissed him then, and it was different from the first time, less tentative, more certain. Like she was choosing this, choosing him, choosing a future that wasn't mapped out in 5-year strategic plans. When they pulled apart, she was smiling through her tears. Okay, she said. Let's try. The next morning, Adriana walked into Voss Industries at 8:55 a.m., wearing a power suit Lucas had never seen and an expression that could cut steel. He waited in the lobby while she met with the board, watching through the glass walls as 8 men who'd betrayed her a week ago now stood and applauded her entrance. It made him sick, but Adriana handled it with grace. She took her seat at the head of the table, and even from a distance, Lucas could see she was in complete control. The meeting lasted 2 hours. When it ended, Adriana emerged looking both triumphant and exhausted. How'd it go? Lucas asked. 3 board members resigned. 2 more will be voted out at the next shareholder meeting. The rest are on probation and know it. She smiled grimly. I also announced that I'm transitioning to executive chairman within 6 months and installing Sam as COO to help me build a new leadership team. They went for it? They're in no position to argue. Half of them could still face charges as accessories to Marcus's fraud. They'll take whatever I give them and be grateful. They left the building together, and Lucas noticed the employees who watched them go, some with admiration, some with confusion, all with respect. You did it, Lucas said when they reached the parking garage. You actually did it. We did it, Adriana corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. Sure you could have. You just would have been more miserable. She laughed, and the sound echoed in the concrete space. Probably true. They drove back to Cedar Falls that afternoon, and when they pulled up to the garage, it felt like coming home in a way Lucas's house never quite had. Emma was waiting on the curb with Maggie, practically vibrating with excitement. You're back! Did you win? Dad said you were fighting bad guys and you won! Adriana crouched down, meeting Emma's eyes. We won. The bad guys lost. Good. Bad guys should lose. Now can you help me with my fairy garden? I added a whole new section for the water fairies and it needs flowers. I would love to help with your fairy garden. Emma grabbed Adriana's hand, dragging her toward Maggie's car, already chattering about water fairies and flower placement and the complex politics of the fairy kingdom. Lucas watched them go, his daughter and the woman who'd shown up bleeding in his parking lot just over a week ago, and felt something settle in his chest that had been restless for years. Maggie appeared beside him, following his gaze. "You're in love with her," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yeah," Lucas admitted. "I think I am." That was fast. Sometimes fast is all you get. And she's staying in Cedar Falls? Some of the time, we're figuring it out. Maggie was quiet for a moment, then she hugged him. "Good. You deserve this. You deserve to be happy." "Thanks, Maggie. But if she hurts you or Emma, I reserve the right to make her life extremely difficult." Noted. Over the next few weeks, they built a routine that felt both new and inevitable. Adriana split her time between Pittsburgh and Cedar Falls, handling the necessary CEO duties remotely when possible and driving in for crucial meetings. Lucas kept the garage running, taught Adriana how to change oil and replace brake pads, and introduced her to the rhythms of small-town life. Emma adopted Adriana as a co-conspirator in all things fairy-related and stopped asking when she was leaving, accepting her presence as a permanent feature. Maggie and Dave threw a dinner party where Adriana charmed everyone despite being wildly overdressed for the occasion. The townspeople of Cedar Falls gossiped endlessly about Lucas Reed's mysterious girlfriend, until Dottie at the diner finally just asked outright, and Lucas told her the whole story. By the next day, everyone knew, and opinions ranged from "good for him" to "that'll never last" to "I always knew there was more to Lucas than just fixing cars." Marcus Holloway pleaded guilty to 14 counts of fraud and embezzlement. He was sentenced to 18 years in federal prison and ordered to pay restitution that would bankrupt him for life. Adriana attended the sentencing but didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. 6 months after that first night in the rain, Adriana officially transitioned to executive chairman, installed a leadership team she trusted, and moved the majority of her work to the loft above Lucas's garage, which they'd renovated into an actual office. The space where she'd slept on a beat-up couch, wrapped in Emma's baby blanket, was now a proper apartment with a real bed, a kitchenette, and furniture that didn't come from someone's curb, but they kept the couch. Some things were too important to replace. One evening, almost a year after everything had started, Lucas and Adriana sat on that couch while Emma slept upstairs in Lucas's house. They were supposed to be watching a movie, but neither of them was paying attention. "I've been thinking," Adriana said. "Dangerous habit." She elbowed him gently. "I'm serious. I've been thinking about what you said that first week, about how you hoped Emma would find someone like you if she ever needed help. I remember. I want to be that person for her, not replacing Rachel. I could never do that, and Emma doesn't need me to try, but being someone she can count on, someone who shows up." Lucas felt his throat tighten. "You already are that person."
Isha si ma'am.
Sapets. Then I want to make it official. Not marriage, we're not there yet, and maybe we never will be, and that's okay. But I want Emma to know she can count on me, that I'm not going anywhere. She already knows that. You moved into my garage and helped her build a fairy kingdom. You're not exactly subtle." Adriana laughed. "Fair point, but I wanted to say it out loud. To you. That this is real for me. You're real. Emma's real. This life we're building, it's messy and complicated and nothing like what I planned, but it's the realest thing I've ever had." Lucas pulled her closer, pressing a kiss to her temple. "You know what I realized?" "What?" "That night you showed up in the rain, I thought I was helping you, giving you shelter, being a decent human being, but the truth is you saved me too." "From what?" "From sleepwalking through my life. From being so focused on survival that I forgot to actually live. You reminded me that it's okay to want more, to take risks, to let someone in even when it's terrifying. We saved each other then." "Yeah, I guess we did." They sat in comfortable silence, the movie playing itself out unnoticed, and Lucas thought about the strange path that had brought them here, about how one decision on a rainy night had changed everything. He thought about Emma upstairs, probably still awake and reading under her covers with a flashlight like she did every night. He thought about the garage below them, the same space where he'd spent 8 years building a small, safe life. He thought about Adriana beside him, fierce and brilliant and still learning how to let herself be loved. And he thought about the future, undefined and uncertain and full of possibilities that terrified and excited him in equal measure. "Hey," Adriana said, breaking into his thoughts. "Yeah? Thank you. For that night in the rain, for letting me stay, for not giving up on me when it would have been easier. Thank you for showing up, for trusting me, for choosing this life even when you could have had anything. This is anything. This is everything." Lucas didn't have words for what he felt in that moment, so he just held her closer and let the feeling wash over him. Outside, Cedar Falls settled into its familiar evening rhythms. Inside the garage turned home, two people who'd been strangers a year ago sat together and built something neither of them had known they needed. It wasn't perfect. They still fought about stupid things, still struggled with the balance between Pittsburgh and Cedar Falls, still had moments where the differences in their worlds felt insurmountable. But it was real. It was theirs. And that was more than enough. Later, after Adriana had gone upstairs to check on Emma and returned smiling because she'd caught her reading under the covers, after they'd cleaned up dinner and locked the garage doors and settled into the quiet comfort of an ordinary evening, Lucas's phone buzzed with a text. It was from Morrison. "Thought you'd want to know. The company's stock price hit an all-time high today. Employees are happy. Board is stable. Turns out sometimes the good guys actually win." Lucas showed it to Adriana, who read it and smiled. "The good guys," she repeated. "That's us? That's us? I like that." She set the phone aside and curled into his side, and Lucas wrapped his arm around her, feeling the weight and warmth of her against him. They'd both lost so much. Adriana, her company, Lucas, his illusions about marriage and partnership. They'd both been broken in ways that should have made trust impossible. But somehow, in a garage in a small town neither of them had been looking for, they'd found each other. And in finding each other, they'd found a way to be whole again. Not perfect, not without scars, but whole. And in the end, that was the only victory that mattered. Emma's voice floated down from upstairs. "Dad! Adriana! Come see what I built for the winter fairies." They looked at each other and laughed, then headed upstairs together to admire whatever elaborate fairy construction Emma had dreamed up. Because this was life now. Fairy gardens and quarterly reports, small-town gossip and corporate strategy sessions, bedtime stories and board meetings. It was messy and complicated and nothing like either of them had planned. It was also perfect in all the ways that actually mattered. And as Lucas climbed the stairs with Adriana's hand in his, listening to Emma's excited explanation of winter fairy politics, he realized something fundamental had shifted. He'd spent 8 years surviving, building a life that was safe and manageable and small. Now, finally, he was living. And it had all started with a woman in the rain and a decision to say yes when it would have been easier to say no. Sometimes, Lucas thought, the best things in life come from the moments when everything falls apart. You just have to be brave enough to build something new from the wreckage.